This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakelin.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking. And Christopher Badell in the third chair.
Hello.
With contributions from Total Fangirl
Vampires do not sparkle.
and our loyal listeners.
Crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, covered at the speed of an undead Hessian soldier beheaded by a cannonball, riding a damn steed hell-bent for leather. Today's edition is brought to you by all of our friends at Patreon, the boys, the girls, the men, the women, the dogs, the cats, that keep the lights on for the show. Today, I'd like to thank David Collins, Alex Coombs, Ken Crouch, Steve Cunyo, and Jeremy Danielson. I'm Geekly McNerdigan, your host. Today, our panelists are Russ, Hans von Ripper Wakelin, and co-owner and editmeister at Greater Than Games, Christopher Brom Van Brunt Badell. Let's begin. Issue number 1. Every gamer is familiar with the greater than sign, a simple symbol that denotes that the value of one variable or thing is more than another. Whether it's a monster that eats the biggest piece of a pie, or a D for dodge the biggest boulder, there's always a time when you need to know where the biggest something is. Question. First appearing in Artis Anaticuli Praxis and Questiones Algebraicus Resolvidindes, the analytical arts applied to solving algebraic equations, in 1631, what famous mathematician is attributed with this book, published posthumously? Srinivasa Ramanujan Russ.
Oh, Mr. Trigonometry.
George Cantor Christopher.
It's actually Mrs. Trigonometry, his wife.
Well played.
We've got a diverse crowd tonight. Unfortunately, both of those diverse answers are wrong. Thomas Harriot, who died 10 years earlier, is said to have actually seen Native Americans using these symbols and incorporated them into his book. Issue number 2. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is the well-loved short story of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman by American author Washington Irving. Written while Irving was living abroad in Birmingham, England, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow was first published in 1820. Question. What was the name of the collection of short stories in which The Legend of Sleepy Hollow first appears? Wolfman Wakelin.
Where's my head?
Creeper Christopher.
Unearthed Americana.
Ooh.
Sadly, that sounds totally possible. Sadly, it is not as in the sketchbook of Jeffrey Crayon Gentleman.
Ooh, that was on the tip of my tongue.
Actually, it's gent. I'm assuming it's gentleman, but it could be gent. Issue number 3. For some reason, one of the most common questions for many people obsessed with popular culture is the old standby, where are they now? Whether we're talking about movie stars, TV personalities, or reality TV professional jerks, some people are always fascinated by people whose 15 minutes have come and gone. Or have they? Question. Jaleel White played Urkel for 9 years, mostly in the 90s, on the TV show Family Matters. He is currently in a new TV series with SNL's Bobby Moynihan on CBS. What is the title of that show? Nate Rickert Russ.
America's Worst Cooks.
Monica Keene Christopher.
Who moved my cheese?
Ooh.
Ooh, that would be a good one, but it's not, sadly, which makes you both wrong again. Me, myself, and I, which actually sounds good enough. I'm going to give it a shot. Issue number 4. The key to a successful game publisher is a constant dynamic release schedule. Whether you're churning out board games, card games, miniature games, RPGs, or all of them together, you want to be feeding the hungry appetite of the beast that is the gaming community. Whether it's elder gods, laser surfers, new planets, or more, not unlike a shark, if you sit still, you die. Question. The word shark is thought to have derived from the Dutch word shirk. What does the Dutch word shirk mean? Requiem Shark Russ.
To dodge responsibility.
Carpet Shark Christopher.
To devour.
Ooh.
The answer is villain or scoundrel, of course.
Ooh.
What'd you think it meant? Good neighbor? Which makes you both finally wrong! That's it for now. Thanks for listening, and good night.
This episode of the D6 generation is brought to you by
Battle Foam, protecting your army so you don't have to.
And the War Store, bringing the war to your door since 1999, and that is for a decade or more. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, and welcome to episode 223, Craig,
That's insane.
of the D6 generation. I am Russ Wakeland.
I am Craig Gallant.
And I'm Christopher Badell.
Hey, Christopher.
Badell!
This is super exciting. I am super big fan. I've mentioned this on the show many times of Sentinels of the Multiverse. To have one of the brains, if not the brain, one of the
It's
larger
the writing
brains.
brain.
Christopher, would you
There's
say you're the
multiple brains
largest? You're the largest brain in the multiverse? Would you claim that?
Oh boy, gosh,
That's
no.
right.
The largest brain in the multiverse would be the villain Highbrow,
excellent.
who,
Lovely.
due to some experimentation that happened to her brain grew to a giant bulbous mass that actually finally ended up leaving her skull. She's a super minor character in the game of Sentinels of the Multiverse, but she'll end up being important later in the future. So.
Ooh, excellent teaser. Well played, sir. Well played.
Thank you.
Nicely. So, Christopher, of course, what exactly is your title there, Greater Than Games, Christopher? How would you describe yourself?
Titles.
Yeah.
Oh, man. When we started the company, we made up silly titles for the three of us because there was only three of us that started the company.
Right.
And over the years, that's a debate we have all the time about, like, should we have more useful titles so people know who we are? Right. So my title is currently Editor-in-Chief.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah,
I
That
love it.
sounds realistic.
Right, and it's a good comic book sort of feel to it, which is actually that title comes from. If you look at like who the editor-in-chief of Marvel is or who the editor-in-chief of DC, that's my job within Greater Than Games.
You're like the
So.
J. Jonah Jameson of Greater Than Games. Right.
Mostly, I just demand photos of Spider-Man on my desk,
Exactly.
like all the time, and people are
Parker!
like, I don't know why you want these. You could just print them off the internet. It's like, no, that's what I need.
No, I need pictures now. That's
Photographs.
awesome.
Yeah.
So since we have Christopher on the show today, it's going to be Greater Than Games all episode long. We're going to talk with Christopher about...
And it's overdue.
It is well overdue, way overdue. We're going to talk to Christopher about how he got his start in geekdom, and then, of course, how Greater Than Games started off. And then later, we're going to have more folks, a veritable, a parcel of Greater Than Game gamers,
Parcel.
I would say.
Is that the technical term?
I think so.
Parcel.
Maybe it's a pod, a peck.
A plethora.
You know, crows have the best animal grouping name, a murder. A murder of Greater Than Gamers are coming over to chat about stuff they're working on lately. So more about that later. But first, Craig, we have to get into some of our... We have some business to get out of the way.
We do have housekeeping, I believe, is what you call that.
We do, yes. A little housekeeping. First up, of course, Craig and I, as we do, especially in fall, we met up at Dunkin' Donuts, had a little pumpkin spice latte along with a pumpkin muffin. No, you should, though. The fact that you don't like pumpkins is a personality defect I'm willing to overlook because of our long friendship. But
I appreciate that.
But whilst we
And
were there,
likewise, I'm sure.
do you remember, Craig, what we discussed in Dunkin' Donuts last time we chatted?
Well, Russ, it's about time we revisit all those old games we reviewed in the far-off, distant past of... Geez, I think we're catching up. I think it's like the ancient times of like a year and a half ago.
Well, it's still like 2 years ago, but yes.
Oh, is it?
So we've almost caught
We're
up
still
to like
catching up.
2 years ago.
By the
when
time
did this.
we were done, it was a year and a half.
Right, but it's almost a half a year since we did this again.
Yeah,
so this is us.
that's true.
We get listeners send us emails all the time. Hey, remember that game you reviewed back in 2009? Do you still play it? So it's fun to kind of go back in time and talk about some of those games. And so we did that again. So if you're interested in that, though, if someone wants to follow up, Craig, and really get this extra little bit of D6 generation content,
then they better listen to you very carefully right now.
He's getting far too good at this. So what you want to do is head on over to thed6generation.com. Click on the little Patreon logo in the upper right-hand corner, and that's how you can check out our Patreon page. And you can donate to the show, a little tip for each episode we put out there. And if you choose to donate $2 or more per episode, you will get full access to the entire Lost Chapters back catalog, which is even more and more hours of this crazy show. So if for some reason the 3 to 4 hours an episode is not enough, go to subscribe to Patreon and get a half an hour more twice per month, because why not?
Why not? That's it. It's an ideal economic model.
It really is. Give most
4
of
hours for free.
Pay for
Charge
extra
them for
bit.
the half hour.
Exactly.
Well, the half hour is where you put the good stuff.
Yes, that's the strategy.
Exactly
Yes,
right.
exactly
That's the thought. Yeah, that's the plan. Yes, exactly the plan. That's where the gold can be found.
And speaking of good stuff, our friend Stephen Bonacore from Stronghold Games was just in the Hizzy. We just met with him at Dunkin' Donuts, actually. He was also on the show, and he was kind enough to kick off a contest with us to give away their latest game, Space Freaks. Space Freaks. This is
I'm
the
not
game...
going to sing.
You don't have to sing, but I just got
Stop,
this. So
Russ. Stop. I refuse to sing.
Craig, please don't sing. Craig, please. Stop.
I'm not going to. Russ.
Good. Okay.
No, I'm not. Okay, fine. Space freaks. Space freaks.
No.
They're super freaky. No.
See. So anyway, just got the box. It's amazing. It is packed full of stuff. This is a game where basically you're doing battle with handcrafted barbarian robot type things on a far off planet.
I don't remember the word barbarian.
I've added it. I've added barbarian because I think it's a little bit
barbarian.
Christopher, if you add a word, a non sequitur word in front of another word, does it make sort of that more superhero-y feel?
It definitely makes it more bombastic, which is frequently what you're going for.
Ooh, man, he's awesome. All right, so yes, so for example, in these Space Freaks, you can put together different arms, different legs. You're basically building a Frankensteinian monster, Mary Shelley-like monster, essentially, that can do battle on this battlefield. And if you'd like to check out this amazing game early and get it pretty much the day it drops, you can enter our contest here that, again, Stronghold Games is sponsoring. All you got to do is send a recording of a short blurb about Space Freaks in the voice of the arena master. That's the announcer who is watching the bombastic battle of bots that's happening in the middle of this arena, right?
And Russ is in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, but I'm also stealing Christopher's words, so it's very easy now with having such a great editor standing nearby here. So think about what you might want to say on that. Go to Stronghold Games websites, get some inspiration from the shots there. And Steven's been kind enough, 3 people are going to be selected from these entries to get free copies shipped directly from Stronghold Games, hot off the pallet.
And breaking the model of our usual audio entry contest, we are actually already getting contestants.
Right, so people are already filing
them in. Come on, do it. Jump on in.
So
the water is proverbially fine.
Exactly right. So 3 winners. How can you go wrong? Send in your entries today, and that is info@the d6generation.com. Can't wait to hear them. We'll play our favorites on the show, and Steven, of course, will help us pick out the winner. So that's all that. So what's the time now for, Craig?
Right now it's time for Achievements in Gaming.
It is indeed part of the show where we talk about what we've been playing lately. Up first, board games, card games, RPGs. Christopher, what have you been playing lately?
Well, so the majority of what I play in my usual life is work. Is play testing. Hey, I'm not complaining.
Right. But it's top secret, right? You probably can't tell us what this is.
Yes. I can tell you that I've been doing some final finishing type work for the Oblivion expansion for Sentinels of the Multiverse, the final Sentinels of the Multiverse expansion that will be out soon. But I was just doing recently I've been doing a bit of final fine-tuning just to make sure everything is the way I want it. And also been doing running a ton of Sentinel Comics role-playing game sessions because that is going to be on Kickstarter next year. And yeah, very, very excited to share about all that stuff. Yep. And then I've also been playing. I've played a bit of a game called Legends of Sleepy Hollow that you will be talking about more in the future. And some other greater than games titles, some which are more secret than others. So that's been a lot of it. In terms of games that I am not directly or indirectly responsible for, there are some. Unfortunately, none of them are board games or card games, but I have been doing a bit of RPGing lately, which is good, as that is kind of my favorite thing to do. What is your favorite, other than, of course, the Sentinels of the Multiverse RPG, was clearly the RPG
superior in every way.
But were you to ever, just kind of step down and a little outside clearly the ultimate choice? What are some of the other RPGs that tickle your fancy? So, man, that's difficult. I really like RPGs, and one of the things that I like is trying something new all the time. So there is on Wednesday nights, today is a Wednesday when we're recording, spoilers, and on Wednesday nights I go rock climbing with my lawyer. That's what I do every Wednesday night, and I actually just got back from that about half an hour ago. Right. So this means you have a lawyer. This means, Christopher, what you've just implied there is that you have a lawyer that you can actually trust with your life.
Oh, absolutely. I trust him with my life, obviously, every week. And,
that's pretty impressive.
No, he's great. Really phenomenal. He's one of the lawyers that we actually have a team of lawyers at Greater Than Games, and he's one of the lawyers that was with us when we started the company. But the reason I mentioned this offhandedly is to get around to the RPG thing, that most Wednesdays after rock climbing, we go to a little barbecue place. It's right by the rock climbing gym. And whenever I go in, I always order whatever the current special is without even really looking at it. I always want to try something different and new. I never want to eat the same thing twice if possible.
No, nice. I like that attitude. That's cool.
And this week, I skipped barbecue to talk to you guys because you're that important to me.
Oh, I appreciate that. I really
my pleasure.
We are honored. We are honored.
But this is the way that I feel about RPGs as well, in that I want to try something different. I want to try something new all the time. And so the most recent RPG that I've been sinking my teeth into is Blades in the Dark, which I don't know if you're familiar with Blades in the Dark. It's so good.
So pitch it.
Have you heard of it?
I'm not familiar with this one. So pitch it.
This is a game that just came out.
Yeah.
And I have not yet even gotten to play it. I have only talked to people about it, and I bought the book, and then I discovered that the special Kickstarter edition of the book, the printer Evil Hat had printed a few extra copies, and they had it for sale on their website if you wanted the special edition from Kickstarter only. I'm like, yes, I do want that. But oh my gosh, it's such a cool game. So did you ever play the video game Thief?
Yes, very much.
It was like, yeah, right. Is this like dark,
one of the
urban,
early stealth assassination kind of games? Yeah, right.
Exactly. Yeah. And the setting from that game was this medieval, urban, steampunky kind of city.
Right.
And that is the setting for this game. This game takes place. Oh man, I'm gonna mess up all the things, I'm sure. But I am just.
That's okay. Your excitement is going to carry it across the finish line.
Okay, good. So the setting of this game is a city called Duskwall, and it is Duskwall or Duskwall is this sprawling steampunk city with a magical barrier around it to keep the undead monsters out of it. And so, okay, great, fine. The setting of the RPG is never a thing that should by itself sell the RPG, but the setting is very cool, and the setting's important because it leads to the kind of stories you're telling within the game. And the stories you're telling are not of a team of stalwart adventurers, but rather a group of rogues, of brigands, of ne'er-do-wells. And you and your fellow scoundrels have to figure out what it is you want to do. And the thing that I love about this game is it's not a game so much where it's like, okay, go on this quest. The GM is giving you a quest. But rather, it's like, hey, here's this city. Here are the different factions that are all important. Here's there's this league of assassins that are doing things over here. And there's these thieves that are doing things over here. And you have to decide as players what kind of rogues you want to be. If you want to try to be assassins or thieves or, con artists or what. And then you go on and then you essentially create missions for yourself where you're like, okay, you know what? We're going to roll over that bank, or we're going to assassinate this official, or whatever you want to do. And so you can Ocean's 11 it, or,
That's awesome.
Just whatever. And the mechanics for it are delightful. The storytelling that's built into it. Like I said, I still have not yet played it, but I've been digging through the book and just like coming up with the things in my head and going, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a fun game to play when I someday make the time to do so. But like it's right now my nighttime reading that like each night before I go to bed, I do a little bit of book reading. And right now I'm reading an RPG rule book, which is like not the sort of thing I usually do. But it's just so delightful. Every character, as a rogue sort of person, you have a vice, and you have to occasionally indulge in your vice because as you do things, you generate stress for yourself, and that stress is bad. You don't want to have a lot of stress. You want to keep your stress amount down. Whenever you've finished a heist or a job or whatever you've gone off to do, you can choose to indulge in your vice. And you can choose to indulge in your vice as much or as little as you like. And so you do so, you indulge, and you choose how much you do. And then the amount that you do is the amount of stress you recover, except you also roll a die. And you have indulged as much as you chose to, plus the roll of a die. And if you overindulge, if you indulge in more of your vice than you had stress and you go over that limit, then you go off on a bender and disappear, and you might be gone and you might be just lost, or you might come back a really different person, or who knows. So anyway,
awesome.
This sounds awesome.
Yeah, the game's delightful.
That's wonderful. Well, I have not had the experience of reading through that game. That sounds amazing. I have, though, really enjoyed the Dresden Files RPG that Evil Hat Productions did a few years ago. And what really impressed me about that, and it sounds like there's some hints of that in Blades in the Dark, is the collaborative nature of the universe building and the storytelling between the game master and the players. So in Dresden, you both you collaborate on, what town you're going to be in, what the primary villain is. That's a two-part. The DM doesn't just go off and build his world. You do it together with the players. It sounds like Blades in the Dark has some similar mechanics to that.
It certainly has that same sort of collaborativeness. Yeah. The other thing that's really impressive to me about Blades in the Dark is John Harper, who is the designer of the game, is also the writer of all the fiction of the game, is also the artist and a cartographer of the game.
Wow.
Every single thing. I was talking to somebody about it and I was showing them, they're like, yeah, but like the drawings all seem like pretty kind of these flat black and white things. I'm like, that's 100% appropriate to the setting. Like that, like you look at the art and it evokes a certain feeling and like that fits with the setting. B, one guy did all of this. So like, man, his art could be terrible and it would still be super impressive, and it's not terrible. So yeah.
I'm looking at the cover. I think it's amazing. I'm loving the style. I think it's great.
Yeah, no, I definitely recommend it. And again, as I've mentioned a couple of times, this recommendation is coming from someone who has not played it, but the recommendations, the people that have told me, I've played this game, and Christopher, you would love it, they're all correct.
Great. Well, it sounds like you dabbled in a lot of RPGs, Christopher, so we'll have to have you back on in the future so you can tell us how it went. It sounds really, really cool. That sounds awesome. Great. Well, Craig, what have you been playing lately?
I played this little game called Rune Wars Miniatures game.
Yes. Now, last episode, you spent quite a bit of time.
I did.
Explaining to our audience how your love-hate relationship with Rune Wars is becoming more and more hate.
Yeah.
Have we recovered from this pitfall?
Well, it's bizarre because we recorded last time the night after we played, and I was still pretty bent out of shape and pretty bitter. And almost immediately after that, I went and I bought a new jigsaw blade, and then I went and I cut the bases out for all of the terrain so I can make 3D terrain for the game. And I actually went online and I found the promo cards and tokens that FFG is giving out right now if you go to events, and of course people on eBay will sell them. And I found one guy who's not trying to make a fortune on it. He's just trying to like recoup. And so I picked up a bunch of acrylic tokens and everything. So I don't understand what's going on with my brain and this game. But clearly it has not let me go yet. And then Russ and I played last night. And I played pretty much the same army. And I thought Russ was going to play pretty much the same army. And he didn't. He played a totally different army.
I did.
Yeah, you did. You used your humans, which it's been a while since I've faced them, and I think it's been a little while since Russ has played them because
they did have one elf unit in there. I put humans with the elves in there.
Yes, there was an elven unit in there. That is true.
Yeah.
And so it was painted armies because whoever's been commenting on Twitter and Facebook,
someone
you shamed Russ.
Me. Yes,
you shamed Russ into going back to a full painted army until he can get those elves done.
It's true.
So it was. It started out very frustrating again, mainly because I forgot about Kira. Is her name Kira? Is that her name? Yes. I think it's Kira's ability where she gets into hand-to-hand and just throws wounds around like they're going out of style in hand-to-hand and with missile weapons, but without following any of the missile weapon rules. So all of the defenses I had set up, there's one model in the game that can circumvent all of them, and it was her.
I've got
and
her.
She killed my HQ in first activation of turn 2. Yep. So I was pretty bent. I was pretty bitter. I was looking at like maybe selling everything that I had just bought on eBay back on eBay again. But slowly things started to come around, and attrition sort of worked in my favor, mainly because skeletons can always sort of slowly come back, and humans can't.
Right.
Or more appropriately, humans can, but they're on my side if they did. Not in the game, but in fluff. Anyway, and so Russ had a couple little things that went wrong, and my huge thing that went wrong was slowly compensated for by the little like very, very minute, and it came down to terrain, right, Russ?
It does.
And as we discussed, and as I discussed in Did You Ever Notice, I specifically made my army fewer points than I could by quite a margin, so I could be sure that I could pick the terrain. And I picked the terrain. I picked the deployment zones and the terrain. And so, although Russ, the one piece of terrain that killed your units was placed by you, I believe.
It was, yes.
So I can't really
my
claim
own plan.
credit.
No, I forgot my own plan, but it was a great game actually.
It was a
very
bloody game.
Oh, many units died. Many
came down to mission.
Yep.
And so I had a blast. It's the first time I played the game in a very long time, and it felt like I thought it was going to feel, other than that brutal slaying in turn 2. It felt like things were working the way I thought they were supposed to work, and it was a lot of fun. And so I really enjoyed it. So it kind of justified all the effort I'm putting in lately. So I was happy. What about you, Russ?
Well, so as we said, played Rune Wars again. Really enjoyed it. I've gone back to my human army with elf allies so I can be fully painted. So several of the different armies, depending on their leader, can add allies. So I added one unit of elven archers all painted up, and now I'm going to try to grow that unit. Looking forward to our next game, Craig. And I'm glad you won. I tried my best, but I'm glad you did, and I'm glad you're feeling the game because I really enjoy it, and I want to expand more. So, Christopher, are you familiar with the new game for Aiello, Bunny Kingdom? Have you seen this game?
No, I have not seen that.
All right, so this game, it was premiered at Gen Con, and so while I was there, my family, for listeners know that my family, I have 2 teenage daughters now, 15 and 13. My wife's also a semi-gamer. Of course, I'm a fanatical gamer. And I was interested in Bunny Kingdom. It looked like the kind of game that my family would like. It looks like it has meaty mechanics, but basically this game is chock full of little plastic bunnies, varying colors for different players, and then also chock full of little plastic castles with towers that are shaped like inverted carrots because they're bunny castles. And basically you're trying to dominate the board. And what's interesting about this game is it's for 3 to 4 players, or you can play 2 players also, but it's really much better with 3 or 4. And what's interesting about the mechanic is it's a card drafting mechanic. So and the board is covered with a very small grid, and each square in these grids, and the bunnies are pretty small, but the detail's pretty amazing. They have little cottontails and little noses, and each player's got a pretty big pile of these little plastic bunnies in their color, along with these little plastic buildings. And what you're trying to do is establish fiefdoms. So you're trying to get your bunnies, not only, you can put 1 bunny in each square, so and once a bunny's in that square, he's pretty much not coming out again. And so over the course of the game, you're trying to get your bunnies adjacent to each other to form fiefdoms. So a bunny in a single square is owning a territory, and if multiple territories are your color, you've now created a fiefdom. And at the end of each round, what you're going to do is you're going to multiply the total number of turrets in a single fiefdom times the different kinds of resources in a single fiefdom, and that's how many victory points that generates. So you're going to go to each fiefdom, figure out the multipliers, and so yes, folks, you are multiplying like rabbits throughout the game, figuring out your victory points. Yes, it took me about half a game to realize, oh my God, the multiplication's part of the theme. So what's interesting about the game, though, really what makes the game very fascinating, beyond the fact that the bits are really cool, and of course there's tons of cards and the card art is amazing, is that it's a drafting game. So each player is going to get dealt at the start of a particular round some number of cards, typically 10 in a 4-player game, and you're going to look at your hand, you're going to pick 2 cards, and you're going to pass the rest of the cards to the left. Now, the 2 cards you pick, you immediately reveal after you pass, but before you look at what was passed to you, and you immediately show them. And most of the time, these cards are coordinates on the board of where you get to place a bunny. So it might say H6, and the board is labeled, so you see get to put a bunny in coordinate H6. But the card might also be you get to build a building of a different size castle in a particular spot, or you can get to add resource types to different spots. And so in the beginning of the game, you're just grabbing whatever cards you get and sort of throwing bunnies wherever. But as the game progresses, you start to realize where you have opportunities to create really high-scoring fiefdoms. And so now when someone hands you some cards, you got 2 tough decisions to make. One, you really want to keep I6, because that one will really join 2 of your fiefdoms into one large fiefdom for a huge multiplier. But 2, you're seeing that your other daughter, if you pass her E7, that's going to connect her fiefdom, so you really can't give that to her. And you only get to keep 2 cards, so you're really wrestling with this thing. And you keep passing these cards until the whole hand has been played, then you score, then you deal out 10 new cards, and you do this again, but now you reverse the order of passing. And that's pretty much the whole game. It is super simple, cute, beautiful-looking game, and after a round, like, you're into it. And the other thing that mixes it up is some of these cards are little scroll cards that you save for later, and these are victory multipliers that happen at the end game. So there might be one card. Exactly. There might be one card that's like, score 5 victory points for every corner of the board you have a bunny in, or score some victory points for every fish that's harvested on the board by you, or score a victory point if you have the largest fiefdom or the most small fiefdoms or whatever. So there's all these little things. So as you're playing, you're suddenly realizing that your play style, or the style you've been forced into, depending how you look at it, might get a nice force multiplier if you can grab this victory card. But then again, you're also looking and saying, oh my God, I can't let my daughter get this victory card because that's right up her alley. Meanwhile, there's 2 great cards in her hand that are also where you need to put bunnies. So you're kind of fighting. So that it's one of those things where way too many choices for what you can actually do, and then also realizing you're passing the other players. Really cute game, really fun, great family game, but it's also fantastic because great for meteor gamers. I played this with my kids, my wife now several times. Also brought it to gaming night. Bunch of real old, a bunch of men in beards playing it. We had a blast with Bunny Kingdom.
How long does it play?
Really quick, about 45 minutes to an hour. Because the mechanics are so simple, and each round, there's not a lot of analysis paralysis because you're only picking 2 cards and passing, right? So the hardest part of the game is actually the scoring bit, where you're actually each going through each of your fiefdoms and figuring out the multipliers. That's really the longest part of the game. But it's fun because you sort of see these like, oh my God, she just scored 30 on one fiefdom. You sort of see the people's plans come to fruition. So definitely check it out. It pretty much sold out at Gen Con. I don't think it's available on store shelves yet, but they should be shipping it pretty soon. So keep an eye out for Bunny Kingdoms. I really enjoyed that one. Mm-hmm. So Craig, what about or Stephen first? Or Stephen? Why is Christopher? Why is the name Stephen in this list? I don't even know why. I apologize, Chris, for calling you Stephen. Christopher, do you do any modeling? Do you do any miniature gaming at all or anything?
Oh, modeling. So no, yeah. I do some underwear modeling and no. Yeah, right. No.
Not your thing. So no. Now, do you do for any of the games you guys produce? I know that Greater Than did some sculpts for one of your games, for a couple of your games actually. Do you do any of the 3D modeling or any of that stuff? Is that up your alley or no?
Me? No. I any sort of claim to creativity or artistry I have is in terms of putting words on a page.
Got it.
I have no drawing or any sort of that sort of thing. But we, like you mentioned, we did have sculpts for a couple of our games. A few years ago, we did a game called Sentinel Tactics that was a miniatures tactical game in the Sentinels of the Multiverse world that we had some superhero sculpts for. And we also just recently came out with a game called Fate of the Elder Gods that has some really nice models for the cultists and the investigators, and those look great. Nice. But we have people for those things that are much better at it than we are internally.
People that are not Christopher. But that's okay.
That is important.
I have people for that.
Right. My minions go forth and make cool plastic bits. Cool. Great. Craig, how about yourself? Did you get any modeling in since last time?
Yeah, well, that's the bizarre thing, right? So I played with the undead last week and got my butt handed to me like royally. And so immediately went home, took a day to be like, I don't ever want to play that game again. And then took out all of my human guys. So this is the irony of it, because Russ used the human guys last night. So when he put that down, I was like, ooh, either way this works, I'm going to be okay. Because if he kills me, I'll be like, ooh, that's my new army that just killed me. And I'm okay with that. But so I am in the process right now of painting the contents of 2 starter boxes of the human, the Dakan warriors, the spearmen and the hero and the horseman. And I did recently pick up another 2 starter boxes worth of humans. So I will have lots of horses and lots of spearmen. But I will tell you that humans paint up a lot. It takes a lot longer to paint a human if you're using a brush. Looking at Russ and his hair.
Cheated with an airbrush. I totally get it.
It takes a lot longer to paint up these humans in their ornate armor and their gold filigree, et cetera, than it does to paint up those moldy skeletons.
Yeah.
So I'm in the process of painting 32 spearmen and 8 horses and the hero is what and the command units.
Yeah. Nice. I'm going to interject real quick here and say this is exactly why I don't play miniatures games. It's not because I don't enjoy them. I have played them before and loved them a lot and realized that if I got into them, I would be spending hours and hours and possibly thousands of dollars on.
Easily.
And
it's a sickness.
And as much as there's a significant part of me in some alternate reality, I don't own a gaming company. Instead, I have the same sickness that you do.
Right. Exactly.
And I don't know which one's better. I'm not advocating one or the other. I'm just saying these are the choices that I've made in this reality.
These are life choices you have to decide on.
Yes, I agree.
You could be successful 100%. Or a miniature gamer. It's pretty much your choice.
Yeah.
Well, now hold on. You say I'm successful. I own a board game company. Let's be realistic.
All right. Excellent. Good point. To Craig's point, I've been working on my elves, and I was at the game store a little early that day, and so I decided I really got good speed results. Listeners have known that since Gen Con last year, 2016, I picked up an airbrush and have been playing with it, and I really got good results, fast results on a lot of different things I've been playing with, but one of them was the humans. But I got to the game store early, and I had my elves, and I figured, well, since I'm here so far ahead of Craig, I got a couple hours to kill. I'll see if I can paint out one unit of elves and then attach them to my humans. So I decided to try to paint them using brush techniques, and since I had just used an airbrush for a while, I wanted to see if it was still faster. So I did get 8 elves, 1 unit done inside 2 hours to tabletop standard, so 3 colors plus inking. But I will say, I think it's slower than the airbrush. So in the same amount of time, I could have gotten the 3 base coats on probably
all of them.
16 to 20. Yeah, could have been triple the number of models I painted. So it is definitely faster. It's not good. Again, I think I've said this on the show before. An airbrush on one model is not so great if you're trying to just paint one single model, because changing colors in airbrush takes a long time. But if you're cranking out like 30 guys and they've all got a lot of green, and then they've all got a lot of blue, and then they've all got a lot of skin tone, you can crank through them because you're only doing 3 color changes, and it's only once per every 20 models or whatever. So that's
what kind of self-respecting elf is going to go to battle in blue?
Mine are not. They're wearing green, browns, and flesh tones. Yes, but you never know. There might be one elf out there who's just thinking to be a little different.
I love blue.
Actually, the elf who wants to be a dentist wears blue.
That's true. So we know exactly what kind of elf.
We know exactly. Not that there's anything wrong with that. What kind of elf would wear blue?
The elf that runs right to HR.
Right, exactly.
Says, I want to train. I want
to be a dentist. All right, never mind. Moving on. So, speaking of movies, Christopher, what any geeky movies, TV shows, books, or comics you've been reading lately?
I actually just recently finished reading a very geeky book. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I was into reading Star Wars books because when I was like in my early teens, that was when there was a wealth of really fantastic Star Wars novels coming out. And at the time, I worked at a library, and so I could get all the books I wanted, read them and return them, no big deal. I had infinite books, and Star Wars novels were just the coolest things to me. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, you know what? I don't know that those hold up. I remember these being phenomenal, but also when I was a teenager, I was really into Star Wars. And like, if you put some like R2-D2 words on a page, I'm going to be into it.
Bleep, bloop, bleep, bloop. I'm sold.
Yeah, right. That's my jam. That's what I'm here for. So, I recently reread, just finished reading actually a couple nights ago, the Han Solo trilogy by A.C. Crispin, which I think came out in the 90s, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And it's really great. It's not necessarily, the best literature I've ever read or anything, but gosh darn it, it's great. It's got Hutt politics and intrigue, which is some of the best stuff out of Star Wars, and it's got heists and space scoundrels. I think I'm into heists and scoundrels right now, I think is what this podcast is bringing out.
You got to think.
That's the thing. So it holds up, though, is what you're saying.
It holds up as
time.
Yeah. For me, it holds up as being like, this is really good and this is really enjoyable. And there's something that's purely Star Wars about it. There's something that reading it that is not like, I'm not sure if that fits with the canon or whatever. It's like, no, this is just very Star Wars feeling, which is kind of a debatable thing that's going on with Star Wars these days. Whether like, regardless of how your feelings are about any number of Star Wars movies, there was a time in ancient times when there were just 3 Star Wars movies, and the feeling of what it is and what isn't a Star Wars was somewhat like pure. And that it's more questionable nowadays of what is and what isn't a Star Wars. And I can say that these books from the 80s or 90s were definitely a Star Wars for me.
Awesome.
I think
it's always nice when you do that and they live up and they entertain. So often they don't.
Right, like I didn't start with going back and reading the Rogue Squadron series, for instance. Like I'm no idiot. I started with something that I thought might have a chance of holding up, because I remember really enjoying the Rogue Squadron series. But I also think back to some of the things that happened. Like, didn't this guy that was like an X-wing pilot at the beginning of this end up being like a Jedi later? What the heck? So yeah.
Excellent.
Cool. Any other? What about TV shows or movies? Anything else caught your fancy lately? No.
I'm pretty terrible about TV. I don't have a lot of TV watching time. Movies, it may surprise you to learn I'm into Star Wars movies, but also really just kind of Disney right now is making the things for me, because between Star Wars and then the MCU, I'm sure shocking to hear that I'm into superhero movies.
What?
Right? It's very incongruous with the rest of my whole thing. Right. I'm very much looking forward to Thor Ragnarok. I have.
Heck yeah.
It was great when the marketing for Thor Ragnarok came out, because the Thor movies have always been these like epic high fantasy movies. I really appreciated what the MCU did when they started, where they were like, okay, well, we're gonna have all these different movies, and essentially they're each going to be a superhero movie, but they're going to be a different right exactly. Yeah, exactly. Where you've got the Iron Man movies, which are just the Fast and the Furious movies, but with suits instead of cars, and you've got the epic high fantasy Thor movies. And you've got the Captain America period pieces.
And you got Guardians of the Galaxy, whatever that is, but it's awesome.
Right. And that was the first one that was like, really this is just going to be its own thing. Right. And so, we all saw the first Thor movie, and we went, okay, cool. And then some of us saw the second Thor movie, and we were like, okay, right? Like it progresses the whole story of the MCU forward, but internally, it's just not the strongest. Like, okay, it's fine. It's kind of like some Thor comics were in the late '90s and early aughts, and just like, okay, sure, they're making those, I guess, but. Then that marketing comes out for Thor Ragnarok, and I, for one, was like, oh, hey, I did not see this coming. This this really different thing with the neons and the 80s and the space aliens. And now I've gone from going, of course, I will see Thor Ragnarok, but I don't know I don't really know what's going on there, to I'm very excited to see it. Also, when the marketing first came out for that movie, it was the same time that we had a game called Laser Riders on Kickstarter that uses the exact same sort of look and feel for its logos and things. Nice. And so, like, there's a lot of people that were like, oh, these things are similar. We're like, yep, and we didn't plan that, and we love it.
Yes, they are. Buy them all.
Yeah, right. Are you into this? Then this other thing's for you.
So do you think, because I feel like it was almost like they found, when they did Guardians, the Galaxy, right? I feel like they found I don't want to say a formula, because Guardians still feels very unique, but I feel like the success of Guardians has informed what they want to do with Thor now. Does that feel like a thing?
Oh, I don't. I would be surprised. And I mean, like, there's no way to really know, because anybody that does know this is going to keep a lid on it. Right. But I would be surprised to learn that this was the plan from the beginning. Right. That they're like, Thor 1 is going to be this epic high fantasy thing, and Thor 2 is going to be this epic high fantasy thing, and then Thor 3 is just going to do like a weird space thing. Like, It seems like it's not very, it doesn't keep with the other Thor movies, and like maybe that's just the marketing, and the movies are going to flow really naturally. But I think that they kind of went, okay, of our various like internal series, because there are people out there that just watch the ones that they care about, that just watch the Iron Man movies, or they just watch the Thor movies or whatever. And of those series, I think they looked at like which one is underperforming, and they're like, well, Thor is probably doing the worst. Like, okay, great. What if we mix that with a thing, our wild card thing that came out of nowhere that is the most interesting thing that people are seeing, and we put some space stuff in there. But I mean, I don't know. Like they had to have had that discussion early enough on to do the Hulk stuff and the blasting off into space stuff. Like, they've set it up for it where I'm sure it will feel like it belongs. I just don't know that was always the plan. But you know what? Adapting and to the situation at hand as you're creating is important.
And you got to learn the market, right? The market shifts.
Oh, yeah.
Expectations change. You got to adjust your movies. But I'm sure the inputs and the outputs are defined. X number of characters are in this situation, and Y number of characters need to come out, right, for the overall plot.
Right. Well, and I mean, I am also certain that can shift if necessary, like due to marketing. But like, man, if anybody, people say, well, why didn't they just do that from the start with all sorts of things? And it's because marketing is sorcery. Like, no one actually knows. Right? how to market anything. You make guesses, and sometimes they just completely succeed, and sometimes they completely fail. And most commonly, they kind of do about as expected, or slightly better or worse. And so when something comes out of left field and really grabs everybody's imagination, and everyone's just super enthused about a thing, it's foolish to just kind of let it slide and not do more with it.
Agreed.
Yep.
Definitely so.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited for Thor 2. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Craig, what about you, sir? You reading anything, watching anything?
I have not made it to the movies in a long time.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah. I am still as I said last episode, I went back and I'm listening to Game of Thrones, and it never ceases to amaze me because I think A Dance with Dragons Book 5 still has left a bad taste in my mouth. So much so that when I go back to read or listen to Game of Thrones, it like strikes me anew how awesome and amazing the first book is. And so I'm just thoroughly enjoying it, even though I've gotten to the point now where I've listened to it. I mean, I've read it probably 5 times, and I've listened to it so much that I kind of know what Roy Dotrice is going to say before he says it, and the tone of voice in which he was going to say it. But I still enjoy it immensely. Although the next Brandon Sanderson book is coming out, I know.
Oh my God!
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Thank God he's writing again. Get on that.
Exactly. So I think what I have to do is I've decided. I think it's coming out in November.
Yeah.
And so
yes.
Yeah. So I'm gonna finish Game of Thrones, and then I'm gonna go back. I don't know if I have the time to do both of the first 2 books, but I might at least do the latest book so that I'm all set up and reminded of what's going on, so that I know what I'm listening to when I go to the next one.
Brandon Sanderson is phenomenal.
He is
Just
absolutely
really amazingly. Sorry to interrupt, but
no.
You said the name of an author that is important to me.
Preach it, Christopher. Preach it.
He's so good. The whole
hallelujah.
Right. All the story, the world building. So the thing that's great about the Words of Radiance and all that stuff, the Stormlight Archives, is that he has done the 2 things that authors of that sort usually excel at, one or the other. Right. Where either you get really great world building and then everybody's just kind of there to play around, or you get really amazing characters and they're dealing with a world that's like fine or whatever. And like, man, his world building is enough to base whatever on. You could make a series of games or TV shows or movies or whatever. Like, the world building is expansive and exhaustive. And then also the characters and their situations and their interactions and the dialogue and the action. Like, he writes action. He writes spear fighting like someone who like genuinely knows spear fighting very well. This is another one of my strange and weird backstory things, because I am just a comic book character pretty much, is that I was a professional competitive spear fighter for many years. And the guidance
office never told me that was an option.
That was not informed. That would have made great rapid fire, Craig.
That's not really a real option, but it is a thing that I did for many years. And
see, I didn't even know there was a profession. in spear fighting.
How does that? You can't just drop that and move on.
You can fight for money.
Well, I feel like spear fighting's the wrong term. Is there a more like, I don't know? It feels like there should be something a little more, like it's not like professional sword fighting. It's fencing, right? Isn't there like a better word for spear fighting? What do they call that?
Well, so fencing and because like sword fighting is also a thing that I've done a lot of, and sword fighting and fencing I would call very differently. Where fencing is a sport, and sword fighting is you put on armor, you pick up a sword, and you attempt to take down another person. And there are different, I was going to say fewer, but that's not necessarily the case, but different rules in sword fighting and fencing. And I've done both. I was a fencer when I was a youth, and then in my 20s I did sword fighting, then that led to spear fighting, and man, spears are the best. I really like.
I mean,
in what venue do you do like competitive spear fighting?
I gotta move on to the spear. I'm getting a little tired of the sword. I wanted to move on to spear. How does that work out?
It was more of a niche thing. Everybody, swords are just so.
It's passe. I mean, just the other day on the way to the 7-Eleven, I saw the sword fight going down. I'm like,
exactly.
Everybody's doing that.
sword.
I wish there was some spear fighting in my neighborhood.
Exactly. Where spear fighting was an area because, man, like I started out by doing almost exclusively the 9-foot spear because the 9-foot spear is great. You're so far from your
I was
opponent.
just saying, Craig, why do you mess with the 7-foot spears, Craig? Why aren't you going with the 9s?
You need to go straight to the 9.
Right.
Yeah, see, I started with the 9s, but then I ended up going on later to the 6-foot spear, and then even the 4-foot spear is a very fun fight because you're right there. It's interesting.
Now is the 4-foot spear? Are you really back to sword fighting again? I mean, is the style? What do you do against a sword with a 4-foot spear?
So 4-foot spear is really just like 4-foot dagger, if you think about it.
Right.
That you've got one hand right up at the head, and you're using the haft for defending your body and the head for striking your opponent. Whereas a sword, you're keeping both hands all the way back at the back. Fighting with the 4-foot spear is more like fighting with a spade than it is like a sword.
Okay. All right.
And now tell me, do you have any experience with fighting with a spade?
I was gonna go there.
I mean, yes. You should ask the folks you're talking to next week about my spade fighting experience because it comes up in their game.
This has got to be a thing. What about clubs? What about clubs and hearts?
Clubs, yes. Hearts, no. And by clubs, I mean maces. I'm being
fair. Sure, of course. Yeah, spiked. Right. Exactly. Excellent. Well,
right. So get back to. You had a question.
No. I need to know what the venue is. Where does one do spear fighting? Where does that occur? In fields.
Okay.
Playgrounds near small children.
Generally in front of a castle.
Right.
That's happened. I've also done it in like community centers. We've done some like demo events at Renaissance festivals and So I mean,
is this like Society for Creative Anachronism?
I started out that way, and then I later went into doing other stuff.
This is too lame. They're not letting me fight with a spear.
I'm going.
Well, no, you could totally do spear fighting in the Society for Creative Anachronism. Okay. But they're using correctly so for the stuff that the SCA does. They're using padded weapons and wooden weapons. Sure. Right. And I was like, you know what? What if we did this, but with more pointy bits?
I need live steel for this to really feel real, right?
Of course. And there's various martial arts stuff you can do there. There's all sorts of Western martial arts things. The HEMA is a big one, so you could do that stuff. It's very fun.
Wow, that is awesome, Christopher. I think we've stumbled onto a whole secret backstory here, Craig.
He's right. He is a comic book character.
He is, yes.
But the point of this whole conversation was Brandon Sanderson, who writes spear fighting like a person who's been in the thick of it. And I mean, I don't want to be presumptuous, but I've met Brandon Sanderson, and I don't think he's done a lot of spear fighting. Just from our interactions. I don't want to like throw him under the bus or anything here.
When you see a person, what is a giveaway that person is a former spear fighter? Is it a stance? Is it a look? Is it like just a head nod? Is it a tilt?
There's the spear fighter handshake.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Handshake, but I've already said too much by even mentioning it. That said, like there's just I don't know. There's that's tricky, because like everybody's going to come at it from a slightly different way, and I could be 100% incorrect that Sanderson could have a quite a spear fighting past that I'm just not giving him enough benefit of the doubt.
Right.
But,
Greg, we have to have now. We got to see if we can get Brandon Sanderson on the show so we can ask him about spear fighing.
We need to dig into this a little.
I think there's something there that we should explore. So
by all means.
Well, great.
So when the first book, the first of the Stormlight Archives books came out, I was actually in a pretty rough time in my own life and found a lot of joy and a lot of personal growth out of Kaladin's story. And so I actually have the very first tattoo I ever got is a tattoo that Kaladin has on himself as well. Not as a tattoo for him though. And so I have the Shash on my chest, and that's a thing that Sanderson and I have emailed about. So.
Oh wow,
that's super cool. That's really cool.
That is very cool.
So Craig, that was Game of Thrones.
That was
awesome though. We learned all about spear fighting. I know more now than I did earlier today. That's
So I'm watching the Orville, which is crazy because I don't like Seth MacFarlane, and I'm loving it, which is even crazier. I'm loving the
Orville too. That show. Yeah. I'm liking it more than Star Trek Discovery, so I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I'm really enjoying it. I expect it to be stupid silly, and it's actually really good.
Yeah. I think they've really struck a very difficult balance, and I don't know. I everything about it feels like they did it on purpose.
Yes.
Like they didn't just stumble upon this. Like, for instance, I think the Tick stumbled out of what it was trying to do.
Right.
They stumbled out of their goal, off their path. I don't feel like Orville stumbled onto their path. I feel like Seth MacFarlane really went, you know what? I'm not going to make this the silly cartoony thing that it could be that everybody's going to expect. I'm going to put some heart into it. I'm going to put some actual thought into the plots. And I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm enjoying the characters. I'm enjoying the interplay. I'm enjoying the stories that they're telling. So that's fantastic. And then very exciting news, because this happens very infrequently, is that Karen, my wife, is willingly watching something that borders on science fiction, and that would be The Handmaid's Tale from Hulu, which won all the Emmy Awards last month. And I did not like the movie from I think it was the 90s when that movie came out. I never read the book, but I think I might. Well, no, because I know I've talked to some people who have read the book. This TV show is great. I think it's awesome. I think the way they're doing it is very clever. I think from what I understand from people who've read the book, they're doing a lot more work on world building. You get a lot more information about what happened to lead to. It's a near future dystopian apocalyptic view of the world is basically what's going on. And I'm really, really enjoying it. And the story is fascinating. I think those people who are equating it to current events, I think it's a Rorschach test. I think it's a very clever, and it was made they filmed it and they did all the editing a year and a half ago. So nothing that was happening in the last however many months had happened when they did this. So I think they may be a little disingenuous if they're claiming, haha, look at these, this equals that, or whatever. I'm just really enjoying it from the story and the acting perspective. I love the way they're working with costumes and colors. It's very, very fascinating to me, and the story itself is really, really cool. So I'm enjoying that. And that's I will cede the rest of my time for spear fighting.
All right, so real quick, just to wrap us up here on achievements, we're going long, but I just wanted to cover. We talked about Orville. Discovery Episode 3. Christopher, are you watching the Star Trek Discovery at all?
I'm afraid that I don't have a means to do so.
Yeah, I know. They made it hard. Are you a Star Trek fan?
Not very clever.
Yeah, are you?
Yeah. So I am not a Star Trek fan, but I'm not a Star Trek fan. I'm just not a TV person in general. But my business partner at Greater Than Games, Paul, is a huge Star Trek fan, and I also know that he would love to be watching it, and isn't because of
CBS's crazy plan. Yeah.
But I have watched a lot of Star Trek with Paul because he's like, Christopher, I'm going to show you this because it's important to me. And we were talking about looking forward to watching it together, but now we're not.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you're missing a lot, but the third episode gave me some hope. So it could end up being pretty strong, but the Orville is definitely a better choice. So if your coworker there is interested in Star Trek, but that's not Star Trek, if he's not watching the Orville, have him give it a go. I think he might enjoy it.
Fair enough.
Also, quick 3 movies. Christopher mentioned Thor. Of course, that's high on my list. Also, I do want to see the new Kingsman, which basically is Cowboys.
Yes, as do I. Yep.
So I can't wait for that. But more importantly, I am so pumped the new Blade Runner is getting great reviews. So I am a huge, huge Blade Runner fan, like one of the foundations of my sci-fi youth. So very excited about the new Blade Runner. All signs point to amazing. So I'll be seeing that on opening day. I cannot wait.
Yeah. Nice.
So there you have it. Is that achievements? I think that's a lot of achieving.
Yeah, that was a lot of achievements.
All right.
In a world where board gaming was king, in a time when Kickstarter ruled the web, when every day brought more and more games, now, more than ever, 2 men and a revolving third chair and a girl, a total fangirl, brought a shining light into the darkness so that all mankind would know what to buy. They are the D6 generation.
Hey, welcome back, and now, of course, it's time to talk about our friends at Battle Foam.
Battlefoam.com.
Battle Foam, always a great place to go. We were just talking about on the last Lost chapter about how excited we are to jump back into Star Wars Armada. You get these games How are you going to carry all those miniatures, Craig? They have little antennas, little fiddly bit, little laser blasters on the side.
I don't have a problem.
Off.
I have got my battle phone.
Don't sound so distracted. What are you doing
Reaching
over
for
there?
this. I was reaching for this. My battle phone.
There you go. And if you go to battlefoam.com, you're really going to see just an amazing variety of ways to transport your super delicate models quickly, easily, and safely. And whether it's custom designed foam to get it exactly laid out the exact way you want, whether it's magnetic racks because maybe you're a hardcore painter and you really don't want your models touching anything but air. You can magnetize you put some metal in the bases, put them on the magnet racks, boom, they're ready to go. Maybe you want a soft-sided case, you want an affordable case you can throw all the foam in. Maybe you want a super hard case that you can run over with a pickup truck and not damage your models and check that bag on an airplane. No problem. Literally, Battle Foam has the bag you need, every flavor of it. Custom tray designer, no problem. Pick which Star Wars ships you're going to put on there. Ships designed for Armada, foam designed for War Machine, Hordes. They have the most licensed bags of anyone I've ever seen. It's just an amazing selection, right, Craig?
It's really a one-stop shop for keeping all the stuff you've already paid a fortune for,
right,
of time and money, to keep it safe.
And don't forget, too, they've got that great cardboard boxes as well. So if you want to store all that foam somewhere, keep the dust off your bottles, and then just switch them out with a really nice bag, you can do that too. They've got every option you'd ever want. It's really,
that is the way to go.
It's really the way to go. So keep an eye on that. Also, don't miss the new Privateer Press bag, man. That new War Machine bag is HOT awesome. So check it all out at battlefoam.com.
Whoa!
And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present... Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep. Seriously, Wakeland, I used to have my own segment, and now I'm relegating to announcing this pap... Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey everyone, welcome to another App of the Ep. This time around, it's a little more than an app. It's really a AAA title that has totally captivated my family. And I don't say this lightly, but this is one of the greatest video game RPGs I've ever had the pleasure of playing. It is Divinity Original Sin 2. We have never played Divinity Original Sin 1, so I was unfamiliar with the awesomeness that is this title. But Original Sin 2 just came out on Steam. I want to say either September or mid-September, I think it was. And we just discovered it a few days ago. Honestly, it was in Game Informer magazine. The game got a 9.75, which, I'm not a really big person to care about ratings too much. But when you see a game rated that highly, it's hard not to take a notice and go, what makes it cool? It is a top-down sort of isometric RPG, very much in the style of, Baldur's Gate and the other classics that many of us enjoyed and loved in our youth. But what's even better about this one is the level of depth and detail and all the options you can do. It's kind of like the dream version you've always thought you should be. Pillars of Eternity was really close to this, but I think this one really nails it, look, feel, and just in every little aspect. So, first of all, character creation, lots of variety in races and classes and customization, including undead, as well as a unique lizard faction that's a little more unique than maybe most games have tried to do. What's really cool about this character creation process is not only are there, I want to say 6 or 7 pre-created characters that have really full voice acting, detailed backgrounds, and these characters, if you play with one of these characters, you're going to have sort of the Witcher / Assassin's Creed feeling where the character's pre-made, but of course you can still level up and change them. And even when you pick a pre-made character, you can still adjust their skills and everything they have. But you can also create your own from the ground up. Unless you feel your own doesn't have quite the background, you have all these background tags you can choose in addition to all your skills and abilities. So even when you choose a class, you're really just choosing a preset of skills, and you can change in sort of multi-class however you want. But when you choose backgrounds like orphan or soldier or whatever, and I think you can pick 2 or 3, they become these tag words. And initially I was like, oh, tags, whatever. Maybe it's just for notes. So when you're playing multiplayer, people can see your tags. But no, when you're actually in the game and in dialogue trees with other characters, you will have dialogue options that have the tag words in front of them. So for example, if you're talking to someone, it might say, yes, I agree. No, I disagree. And then there's one that gets brackets the word soldier on it and says, I admire your weaponry, sir. May I take a look at it? And it'll take you down a whole different dialogue path and a whole different story path if you have some of these tags. So it really gives you the feeling of a pen and paper RPG where the person that has a scholarship skill or a knowledge skill gets more information. There is a scholar background, and that gives you other kinds of dialogue trees. So it really feels like that all matters. And there's so much content and writing in the game to capture all that. The game is also fully voice acted. So every dialogue, there's abilities to talk with animals. Every animal's got their own voice, their own dialogue, their own background. It is just the depth of detail is crazy. And then once you create your characters and you start the game, the story is wonderful, immediately captivating. You're immediately engaged. The combat is fully tactical. So think XCOM style combat in a fantasy game, where you're really choosing your abilities and choosing what you can do in the battle. Everything in the environment interacts with spells the way you expect. So if you're standing in a puddle of water and two of your friends are as well, and you decide to cast a lightning bolt at someone across the table, well, because lightning is electric and you're standing in water, all of a sudden you kind of partially electrocute everybody standing next to you. Or if the enemy's standing in water, you have an advantage. So if you have a spell, for example, or let's say you have a flask of water, you could throw at somebody to spread a pool of water, then hit them with lightning, all the better. So there's like these cool little things. I ended up finding gloves of teleportation. So in the middle of a battle, there might be a barrel of oil nearby. I can teleport the barrel of oil on top of an enemy. It drops it and breaks open, starts to splash around. Then my archer shoots a flaming arrow at somebody. Then my fighter pushes him into the oil, setting that on fire and everybody. I mean, you can do just whatever you wanted. The combat system is really amazing also. But then I should also say that the way the game is written, the way the quests are set up, they don't actually, it's not a, hey, go to this quest point and here's a flag on your map. They really don't do that in this game. So you've got to be okay with the fact that you actually have to listen to and read your journal and try to understand the way to do things. And the reason they don't do that is because there are multiple ways to do things. So you might have to get inside of a castle. You could, if you had gloves of teleportation or flying or extremely good wall climbing, go over the wall. Or you could fight your way through the main gate. Or if you're a thief, maybe you pick your lock through the side door. Or maybe you disguise yourself and go in another way. There's so many different ways to do and solve problems in this game. It's really it's amazing, and you're overwhelmed if you try to do everything. You're better off at approaching the game like a pen and paper RPG, and just wherever you go, you go. And what I found to be really fun, and what my daughters and I are really enjoying, is it's multiplayer as well. So it supports 4 heroes, and if you're playing solo, you'll eventually team up with other folks and find party members for your party, a la Baldur's Gate. But if you'd like, other people can create their own characters and from the beginning with you and then play in the campaign with you. So instead of having other people join, my youngest daughter and I are playing together. My oldest daughter really likes to do the stories on her own. She's playing on her own, but the 3 of us are all playing in the same room, discussing how we're solving problems. It's great when my youngest daughter and I are playing together. There's 4 characters in our party. We each control 2. We level them both up. There's our primary each, which feel like the character we created, but then there's the allies we've joined, and we play with those guys as well. It's just incredibly good fun. And what I'm also looking forward to trying out is there's also a DM mode in which one of the players actually runs the game as the dungeon master. There's already a single intro module you can play, and the other players just roll their characters up and go into your world, and you literally play D&D essentially on this thing. Really, I mean, I know it's all been tried in various levels of success before, but this game just nails it. It is so polished, so great, and it's running fantastically on all of our computers. And my kids' laptops, honestly, aren't high-end gaming rigs. So I think you can, if you've got a decent mid-level computer, it's going to run fine, and it's going to look fine. And of course, you have a higher-end rig. It's got all those tweaks to make it look amazing, but it looks really good. It's a great, great game. The amount of writing, the amount of voice acting, I cannot overstate really the RPG experience here and the wonder that is Divinity Original Sin 2. Get on Steam, try it out now. You will not regret it. Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the Ep, a segment in which, hey, less of that, more just getting on with the show. Seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class.
Hey, welcome back. And we can't have Christopher on the show here and not ask him, well, several questions about he and Greater Than Games got their start. But Christopher, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we ask all first-time third chairs here on the D6 generation one important and critical question.
Yes, one would say origin story,
yes.
Really.
Christopher, are you now or have you ever been a gamer?
I have always been a gamer.
Ooh.
Nice. Now, what was as you think back to those early fog, misty-filled days of your youth, what were some of the games? What was the first game that you played that you would say sort of started to show you there were games other than Monopoly, Candyland, Chutes and Ladders, and Life?
They were those games. 'Cause, like, we all played those games, right?
Sure, right. Yeah, exactly.
So my backstory starts on a dark and stormy night in South America. In that I'm from Venezuela. That's where I was born and spent most of my childhood. And in Venezuela, so I'm an American, just like everybody. But as an American, like all Americans are mutts of some sort.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit strange in that I'm 50% Venezuelan and 50% Scottish. My mom's family's from Scotland. My dad's family's from Venezuela.
Nice.
And they met in Kansas, of all places.
Well,
and
where else?
Right. It's the middle between those two geographically. And they and then my dad had to move back to Venezuela to pay off his school because the government gave him a scholarship to go to North America. Anyway, this is a long backstory. But my brother, I had a younger brother, and my brother and I in Venezuela had nothing to do. Because there's very little to do. It's a pretty terrible place. I don't know if you've seen the news recently. Venezuela is especially terrible. But even those decades ago when we were living there, it was pretty terrible. And there was just it was a tough time. And so we had some pretty beat up copies of old board games that were not very great. But I also had this voracious appetite for stories of fantasy and sci-fi and of realms beyond. And so I would read these books and go, wow, it'd be really cool if a game modeled something like this, something like the battles that I've read about in the Chronicles of Narnia or The Hobbit or something like that. Where's my game that feels like this? And so the first game that really ever grabbed my brother and I when we were kids was Risk. Because even though Risk isn't that experience at all, it doesn't matter. It was just the two of us, and we were just playing games with just us. So it had to become a different game. And so it became a game where we were both controlling our own armies, dealing with the invading forces of some terrible orcs or goblins or something like that. And I kind of wrote an AI for the game to make Risk into a cooperative game.
That's awesome.
For us to play.
How old were you when you wrote that first AI for the game to run itself against you guys?
Maybe 9 is when the first iteration of that came around. Maybe younger than that, though. It's hard to say. I guess it had to be. Maybe it was 7 or 8 then. I don't know. It's tough to remember.
It's foggy now. Sure, that's okay.
It is, and also it wasn't a thing that I ever put any thought into. I was in later. This was not a thing that I realized was part of my backstory until after Greater Than Games had been around for a year or two, and a lot of people in my family were like, "Christopher, you quit your career to make a game company," and we all thought that was kind of dumb, but it has been working out, and none of us really thought it would, except for my brother, who was like, "Oh yeah, Christopher, you've always designed games." And I was like, no, not like this. And he's like, yeah, remember when you did that completely different version of Risk when we were kids? And I didn't remember that. Right. Because for me, that was just we are trying to play this game. It's just like making a house rule. It's we're trying to play this game. It's not working for us. I guess I'll just change it to make it work for us. Right. It's like, no, you completely rewrote the game and made it something completely different using the components of the original game.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that is where I got my start in gaming. It was not until I was in my late teens and I played a game called Arkham Horror that I was exposed to other games, to the hobby market, really.
Right, nice. And so it was really, so you came the board game route, but as you mentioned, it was really sort of the standard, board games found in most people's homes until a little later in your life. When did you discover, even beyond board games like RPGs? When did that happen?
I actually played RPGs before I played Arkham Horror.
Okay.
But RPGs were a different kind of thing. That RPGs were about you read these rules and you get your character sheet, and then you just sit around telling stories with using this as a framework. And that's, I think, why Arkham Horror was such a perfect, great game. Is that for me to start with, because it's this cooperative game where if you just play Arkham Horror and you're only you really only care about the roles and the rules and the mechanics of beating the game, you're going to find it to be a very long slog, and eventually you'll win or lose, and you might be frustrated with a lot of the aspects of the game. But if as you're playing it, you're telling the story of your character, you're like, oh no, I got sucked into this other dimension, and while I was there, I discovered this thing, and you're like having a bit of personal. You're invested, you're tied into what's happening, then that's that game. All of the minutia of it, all of the complaints that people have about complexity or whatever, just fall away, because that's what you have to do.
Yeah. So Christopher, I'm sensing a theme in young Christopher here. I'm sensing a theme that you like telling stories or stories being created. And also you like co-op. I mean, you're the first person I've ever heard that transforms a game like Risk, which would probably be the antithesis of co-op, except for makeshift alliances that fall apart rather rapidly, into a pure co-op game. So have you looked back? Are you always been sort of a big co-op person? Are those the kind of games you've always preferred? I mean, RPG is really a cooperative experience as well when you think about it.
Yeah, collaborative. I'm really glad you said that word, because that is the crux of who I am as a person. I think that everyone's story is fascinating, and I'm always interested to know people's stories. And I love telling stories, and I love listening to stories. The stories are what humans have that makes us different from every other form of life that we've encountered so far. The stories of people and of what we do is what is the coolest thing about us. Our ability to create stories and tell stories and share stories, and interact with stories. And that you're talking about Game of Thrones earlier, and there's conversations about the books versus the TV shows or whatever, and the fact that those stories have grabbed so many people and so many different ways, I love it. I genuinely have a deep love of stories and storytelling and everything related to that. And so the fact that gaming can be an extension of that's for me what the best games are, the ones that evoke stories. Where if you talk about a game like Carcassonne, which doesn't really inherently have a story to it. The stories that people tell about, this one time we played Carcassonne, they're probably not going to say that I placed the road tile, but then he placed the road tile, but then I placed the other road tile, and then he placed the other road tile. No, somebody's going to say something like, well, I was the road baron. I was just building all these roads all over the place, being the road baron. But this other guy kept putting these farmers down, and all the farmers, and they're creating this story that wasn't there, that didn't happen in the game, but they all experienced together at the table. Shared experience. Anyway, sorry. This is kind of my area.
That's great.
And yeah.
So how did your story go from passionate gamer into getting into the industry? I mean, when did you start to think about, because you even said that when you look back, you didn't really self-identify as a game designer your whole life. So when did that sort of when did you have this inkling of this idea that you wanted to get involved in the industry?
Well, it came about actually related to spear fighting.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we talked about that earlier then. How convenient.
Right, I was going to say, as depending on what order these are released chronologically.
So far, so good. You're in order.
Okay.
You're doing
great. I spent a lot of my 20s doing a lot of combat stuff, and in that time I got a spinal injury in which I separated my spine, kind of like you can separate a shoulder, but with a couple of vertebrae of the spinal cord, which is bad.
That sounds bad.
Don't do that thing.
Yeah,
that sounds bad.
Right.
Yeah, right. And so I was I had some doctors check me out, and they're like, yeah, I know why you're experiencing this pain. You need to stop doing things. You can't do things anymore. And it's I can't do combat stuff. Yeah, obviously you can't do combat anymore, but obviously also lift anything more than 5 pounds. Don't do that. Right. Just don't do stuff. And it's but doing stuff is my favorite. So yeah. And So I had some forced downtime because at that point in my life I was doing fighting type events multiple times a week, and that was like what all of my weekend time was, and that was no longer an option available to me. And usually I don't go this far into the backstory, but since we mentioned it earlier, I'm like, well, I can tie this all together now.
Nice.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great.
It's a narrative. It runs through the whole thing.
We should share with the listeners too that you've since recovered, because you were talking us off the air about how you do rock climbing now. So clearly, I'm glad to hear that you've overcome your back injuries.
Yes. My back injuries and my knee injuries, which I had some latent knee injuries from fencing when I was a teenager, that have been recovered both by rest and now also a lot by rock climbing. Rock climbing has been really great physical therapy because it's a lot about controlled movements and isolating certain muscle groups. But anyway. So in this time, in this time in which I was forced to not do things, I was like, you know what, I should do more creative stuff in this time. And this is where my backstory starts intersecting with other people's backstories, because collaboration is the important part of how stuff gets done, so especially with Greater Than Games. And a good friend of mine, Adam Rebataro, who, spoilers, is the artist for all things Sentinels of the Multiverse.
And he's amazing, because I love his art. That's, I think, part of the magic of Sentinels, besides the awesome writing, we'll throw that out there, and rules, is the art. I mean, the fact that you guys, I'm still blown away by, and I'd love to talk about this a little more later because I know I'm jumping ahead. I'm still blown away by how Sentinels of the Multiverse perfectly captures the feeling of a comic book.
Oh, an entire world.
And yet is not an IP. Like, it's just totally made out of whole cloth. But it's like every superhero ever. Like, that is such a... It's such a magical ability to do that. I don't even know how you got the right people in the right room to figure that all out, but it's astounding to me.
Thank you. I mean, and I'm about to get to that.
Go. Sorry, I jumped in.
No. But the thing that's really cool now is that you're right. It wasn't an IP, and now it is. Right. Like it actually is now. Now there's stories about these characters, and there are like it's a thing now. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this has been a wild ride, guys. But anyway, so my friend Adam, I was living in the Kansas City area at the time, and Adam used to live there, and we hung out when we were kids. But then he moved around college when we were both about the same age, and during college he moved to California to make movies. And he was back in Kansas City for a weekend to go to a friend's wedding, and he and I weren't planning on hanging out because he was just there for the wedding and he was flying back. But he called me the day before he had to leave, and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing wedding stuff tonight until like 9 p.m. And then I have a flight that I have to be at the airport at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. Do you want to just hang out tonight overnight like we used to?" Because the two of us used to work at an overnight location, an overnight store, and would just hang out and do useless gaming things all night. And so I was like, yeah, sure, let's do that thing. So we went to an IHOP, and because it's open 24 hours a day, and we just sat around to tell stories and catch up and things. And one of the things we talked about was like, man, we always wanted to have a game that felt like a comic book, because the thing that we were into, the joint fandom that our friendship was based around, was comic books and comic book storytelling. Adam has always been an artist. He's a phenomenal drawer, and I use great art words for him. I talk about the arts that he makes, and he's like, "That's okay, fine, that's not right." But he does. He makes great arts, and I've always been a storyteller, and so the two of us had in our teenage years crafted a lot of comic book stories that were awful, and made a bunch of comic books that were really bad and nobody ever wants to see. They're terrible. But we did those things. That was a part of our childhood. And so we were talking about, like, man, it would be cool to have a game, a tabletop game that felt like that felt like the collaborative effort of a superhero fight in a comic book, because that doesn't really exist. We'd both, played lots of different games, and of course, since we loved comic books, we'd searched out a bunch of comic book games and not found one that made us feel like a comic book. So we're like, okay, what does that look like? And we just kind of started going down this rabbit hole. And it was like, what you would have to have a certain number of heroes, each of which operate in their completely unique way, and they're all very powerful. You have to feel really powerful as a hero, but your opponent is over the top powerful and is completely undefeatable unless you are working with your allies, and the things you do together as a group is what makes the team work. It's not going to be the work of any one hero that wins the day. And of course, you have to have like a dynamic, ever-changing environment that the battles take place in, because superhero fights happen in cool and weird places. And we kind of wrote out this. We had a notebook with this. We kind of filled out a couple pages of like, this is what it would have to have for it to work. And after we had filled out those pages, we looked at it and we're like, well, that's the game. That's it right there. Like all those things. Everything else is just minutia. Everything else is just like super minor, card mechanics to make everything flow. And I'm good at minutia. Like that's my jam. And so Adam started drawing and I started writing stories and mechanics. And we called the airport and moved his flight from that morning to that evening. So we had another like 8 hours or so of work that we could do on it. And by the time that he was on that flight, we had a dozen plus heroes and at least as many villains already drafted out in terms of how they would look and what their stories were. And I already had the basic mechanics of how the game would work all kind of written out. And that was in August of 2010. And by the end of the year, the game was done in terms of game design, and Adam had like the full list of art that he needed to make for the game. And in January of 2011, we formed a company. So that, I mean, the process of this was extremely fast.
So at this point, were you thinking, I assume you were playtesting with people and sort of getting feedback and sort of, getting the idea that was working. And at that time, you're like, how are we going to bring this to market? We're going to start our own. I mean, did you think go to a publisher? We're just going to start our own company and make it ourselves? Or what was
none of those things. In fact, all of that was none of that was at all a thing that we were interested in or a thing that we were looking at. And I'm so glad that you asked that question, because that lets me sneak in the third person of the company. And that's what makes the holy triumvirate of Greater Than Games. Like you said, we made the game and we started playing it with a lot of people. And we didn't look at it as playtesting. We looked at it as, look, we made this game for us. This game, Sentinels of the Multiverse, is the most Adam and Christopher product ever. Like, it's the most selfishly designed game because it has always been, from day one until now, just whatever we want to play. Like, it's just for us. Many times people ask me, oh, you're a game designer. What's your favorite game to play? And it's like, man, it's Sentinels of the Multiverse. I wrote that game to be my favorite game. There's no way. But anyway, so we played it with a bunch of people just to share it. And we're like, hey, check out this thing. And then people would be like, oh, this is good. And sometimes in the process of playing it, we'd be like, oh, this thing has to change. So it was playtesting. But we didn't know that. We just thought we were playing it for fun. One of the people we played it with is my friend Paul, who Paul and I had been friends for several years. And Paul was like, wow, guys, this is really good. And we're like, oh, thanks. He's like, no, this is really good. You should sell this to somebody. And Paul, at this point, is more aware of the board game industry than either one of us are. Adam and I have no real idea. Like, there's in Kansas City, there's a local game store called Tabletop Game and Hobby. It's one of my favorite game stores in the world. Phil has owned that store for years, and he still does. And every time I'm back in Kansas City, I go there, and he's great. And so we know of this store, and like we pick up games off the shelf there, and sometimes we accidentally would buy a game that was like the new hotness, but sometimes we'd accidentally buy a game that was like 20 years old, and we have no idea. We're so far away from any part of the industry, with the exception of like I'm up on all the D&D 3.5 stuff around this era. Yeah. So Paul, on the other hand, has gone to every Gen Con since it was in Indianapolis, and I think that like 2 or 3 of the Gen Cons that were before it was in Indianapolis.
Right. He's hardcore, yeah.
Right. Now, and he just he goes every year, and he knows all the things, and he knows all the people, and he's not part of the industry, but he's aware. He's a regular annual Gen Con attendee. He's he knows what's going on, and he's like, you guys could do something with this. You could sell this to one of these companies. I'm familiar with all these different companies I see at Gen Con. You could sell it to them, and they could make this game. And my reaction to that was visceral. I was like, no. There's no way. Like, this is my baby. I don't have any plans for it, but I know that it is mine. Like, this is not for someone else to make. And he's like, okay, cool. That's totally reasonable. What if you made the game yourself, though? What if you made a company and made the game? And I'm like, ugh. Well, that sounds annoying and hard.
Work, right?
Right. Yeah. And Paul's like, and then Paul tells me the lie the greatest lie that I've ever been told. The lie that made all this possible. Paul says, no, it'll be easy.
Oh, jeez.
And I was like, okay, cool. And so Paul, who has made a few companies before and has done that kind of thing, is the reason that Greater Than Games exists. And he is the CEO of Greater Than Games now, and rightly so, well deserved, because he is the guy that is the one that makes us a company. And we in January of 2011 we established the company, and we found a printer and printed the first edition of the game. And I don't know if you guys have seen the first edition of Sentinels: The Multiverse from 2011.
I have not. I got a later edition. So
good.
I do have one, but it's a later version.
Excellent. Good. That is good. Every so often I talk to someone, they're like, oh yeah, I've got my original edition on the shelf. I'm like, just burn it. Just throw it away. Just get rid of it and get a new edition. Because the first print run, a thing that I do when I tell the stories, I do not say the name of the printer, and I will not publicly say the name of the printer, because this printer is a big deal in the industry. It prints a lot of card games for a lot of people. And as a result, they had no time for us. We contacted them. We're like, hey, we want to give you money for goods and services. We'd like to send you all these card files, and you print these cards in a box and you send them back to us. And they jerked us around and did a mediocre job and made the first edition of Sentinels. And as a result, we had 5,000 copies of Sentinels of the Multiverse that we received in July and were able to take to Gen Con, because this was 2011. This was still a little Wild Westy in that like April, we could call Gen Con and get a 10x10 booth. Right. That is nonsense now. That's impossible. Right. But in 2011, we could do that. And so we did that thing. We had a Gen Con booth. We printed the game, and it was not really the quality that we were hoping for. The card quality, the card stock was super thin. The box was terrible. Just lots of issues with it. But we had it. We finally had it, and we were excited to see it become a reality. In order to fund all this was pre-Kickstarter for us. And so in order to fund all this, we found an interested investor that we were like, hey, here's the deal. We want to do all these things, but we need capital to make this, because we've determined that we want to have this game in stores. So we don't want to just make this as like a one-off project and be done. We want to make a company out of this. We want to launch something with this. We think it has the potential to be big based on all the responses we've had with the people we played it with, because we played this game with tons of people. One of the people I played it with actually was Phil, the owner of Tabletop. And I went to him and I said, hey, Phil, I'm making a game company. And he's known me for years at this point, since I was a kid. And he's like, oh, Christopher, let's go to lunch. And he closed down the shop. We go to lunch and he says, don't do this thing. Don't make a game company. I see so many people with really great ideas, with really phenomenal games, go into this, they try to make a thing, and the industry just eats them alive, and they're left hating the thing they made in the first place and not having anything left to show of it other than a lot of wasted time and a lot of tears. And I was like, oh, shoot, okay, well, I mean, thank you for the information. That's definitely saved. It's giving me something. Well, no, and it wasn't too late at that point. That was in January, and we hadn't started the company yet. I was like, okay, no, that's a really good point. And he's like, and he could tell that I was a little crushed. And he's like, okay, well, hold on. You brought the game with me. Show it to me. Like, let me see this cool game. Let's at least talk about the game. And so I played the game with him. And then he's like, okay, all the stuff I told you, ignore it. Just don't absolutely ignore it. You should make this company. You've got something special here, but now let me give you a completely different set of information. And I happen to have a notebook with me, because I usually do. And I filled up several pages with that information, and that advice really helped us out. And it made us realize at the beginning, we need to get this game into stores. We can't just take a couple hundred copies to Gen Con and hope that starts as a company. No. We need to be talking to distributors and retailers and all that stuff. So we sold off 10% of the company to an investor for $50,000 when we started the company. And that was kind of we were hoping for that, and we made it work. And that was a big boon for us, because it made us immediately value the company at $500,000 with us having made nothing. Right.
I'm imagining you on Shark Tank. We're exactly. $10,000 for 10% of our company. And they're like, sure, what's your current revenue? You're like, zero.
Nothing. We have an idea. We have a game that we've made on index cards, and it feels, when you play it, you feel like you are a comic book superhero.
Right, exactly.
That was our lightning in the bottle. That we had captured the feeling of a comic book superhero on cards, and that was a thing that for us we had never encountered before. That was what we wanted to feel.
But
we
also
wanted to
even in this early sort of, I guess, playtest copy, or I don't know what to describe it as, the alpha version,
prototype.
I guess. Prototype, there you go. That's the word I'm looking for. Did you have the art in there, though? Because I feel like the art is as much a part of Sentinels as the rules. Like, so I don't know how else to describe it, but was that there then?
For the early versions, absolutely not. There was sketches on cards, and those were mostly my sketches, which are terrible. But there was a placeholder to be like, art will go here. Here's a picture of a thing. And even in the early prototypes without any art, it had that feeling. And then as we did more prototypes and Adam finished more art, it got better and better. You should look up the original edition of Sentinels: The Multiverse core game box, though, because the box cover on that is very different art. Because I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. If you have the original, if you have, the core game of Sentinels: The Multiverse, you think about the art on the cover of that and the art on the cards of that, and then think about the art that's come out for the most recent expansions. Like, his art has gotten so much better every year. Not to say that it was bad to start off, but my goodness, he's grown as an artist, which is, I mean, when that's your full-time everyday job, you're going to get better. And the original edition of Sentinels, the art was really rough, but it's still, it wasn't about the quality of the art. It was about the character of the art. There's so much character shown through. We printed the 5,000 copies of Sentinels: The Multiverse. We took it to Gen Con 2011. We had a little 10x10 booth in the back of the hall, and we had rented a truck to put all the copies in the truck to take to Gen Con. And if we didn't sell any Sentinels: The Multiverse at the show, we would have not had enough money left in Greater Than Games bank account to gas up the truck to drive back from Gen Con.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
We were tapped. We'd spent it all.
Living on the bloody edge.
Yeah. And that was fine. Like, that's what we were here to do, because at this point, if everything fails, then fine. We close up shop. Paul's living in St. Louis. I'm living in Kansas City. Adam's living in California still. And we did this thing. We made the game. We each now get to have, several copies of the game. We get to be proud that we made the thing, and that's fine. None of us started this going, this is going to become a full-time job, let alone a career for any of us. This is going to be a thing we do on the side. And at Gen Con, by the second day of Gen Con, or by the end of the first day of Gen Con, we had lines of people at our booth lining up to play Sentinels: The Multiverse. People would walk by, and at the beginning, we didn't have any advertisement. We had like one little banner that said Sentinels: The Multiverse on it and had a couple of hero faces. And then the booth was just 2 or 3 tables of us running the game. And people would walk by, and we'd be like, hey, do you want to sit and play Sentinels: The Multiverse? It's a cooperative superhero card game. And people would play it, and they would love it. And it just spread by word of mouth. We got to play it with a bunch of people that really got into it. Tom Vassell ended up calling it the #1 game of Gen Con 2011, which certainly helped. But a lot of people, just everybody was talking about it. It was kind of this weird dark horse for the show. And we didn't even have any idea who was talking about it or who people were. Like, somebody came up to us a couple weeks later. We were at a show called PAX Prime. It's called PAX Prime at the time. It's now called PAX West. But we were at that show showing the game off, and somebody came up and said, hey, on his podcast, Tom Vassell just called Sentinels: The Multiverse the #1 game of Gen Con 2011. And we're like, oh, that's so cool. Who's Tom Vassell? Because we have no idea any of this stuff. Like, we're not part of this world. We just happen to make a game. And it worked. The #1 game we got at Gen Con and at the #1 question that we got at Gen Con and then later at PAX was, where are the expansions? Right. And we're like, I'm sorry, what?
What's that?
We just spent all of our time and definitely all of our money making this game. Do you want expansions? They're like, yeah, you definitely have expansions for more heroes and villains and environments, right? And we're like, well, I mean, yes, we've written, we have all these characters, because at the beginning, like, Adam and I crafted this whole world and there's all these stories of so many characters and so many heroes and villains. Like, this whole multiverse of things that have been around since the beginning. But we just kind of did that because we're like, well, we want this game to feel like it is, an officially licensed Marvel or DC game that is resting on decades and decades of comic book history, and that all these characters have infinite stories that people just know who they are. And so in order for that to be true, let's create all this meta around it that nobody will ever see. It'll never come to the light of day, but we'll make it anyway. And so when people are like, hey, where's the expansions? Adam and I are like, oh yeah, we could make an expansion based around the whole like Rook City crime thing, or we could make it around like the magic of the multiverse stuff that's going on with these other things. Like, but we haven't done that yet. There's no money for it. And so we did a Kickstarter that fall, or that November, I think. And this was in 2011 in the Wild West of Kickstarter.
Well, that's right. So it was interesting because I think you guys launched, it sounds like you guys launched Greater Than Games right before or right around the time that Kickstarter was just starting to become a thing, right? So
yes.
It wasn't like today, if someone were trying to do what you did then, they'd probably go right to Kickstarter, right?
Right.
And,
yep.
And so you went the more traditional route. But Kickstarter had just grown up enough, so it sounds like when you're ready to go for your first expansion, you're like, aha, this is how we can fund the next expansion without, liquidating our bank account, right?
Right, because we're like, we'll need at least like $20,000 to make an expansion, but oh boy, I mean, and we're making money because we're selling this game extremely fast, but we also have to, we're going to have to do a reprint of this game, and we can't afford to do a reprint of this game and an expansion just on our sales so far. So okay, well let's try this Kickstarter thing out, and so we did a Kickstarter, and we asked for $12,000. And we're like, okay, if we can make $12,000, we can cover, because it would cost us about $20,000 to do an expansion. But we're like, you know what? If we can even get $12,000, we can cover the rest from Greater Than Games aside from the money we're making. We just need some help here. And we got $28,000, which for us was just like, oh my God, that's amazing. And even still, like that was actually at that era, like that was a huge.
That was a big number back then. Yeah, right.
Right.
Exactly.
People are like, what? You more than doubled your funding? And we were blown away. Funded very quickly. And so we did that Rook City Kickstarter, and we made the game and we got that out to people. And then the next year we did another Kickstarter, both for an expansion and for the enhanced edition of Sentinels: The Multiverse, which is now just the standard edition. But we're like, okay, hold on. We now have a different printer. We had a printer that contacted us that we worked with for Rook City, for the Rook City expansion, and they did a much better job, and they were willing to play ball with us and, consider us as a customer instead of like as a charity. So we're like, great, we want to print the core game through them, and we want it to be the way we wanted it in the first place, with tokens and with the quality box that you can put everything in, and dividers and organizers and all that stuff. And so we did that on Kickstarter, and I think we asked for $20,000 and made like, I don't know, $60,000 or $80,000, something like that. Anyway, just the Kickstarter, the first three things we did on Kickstarter were all Sentinels: The Multiverse things, and they all did very well. And after that, we said, okay, cool. We are not going to do Kickstarters for Sentinels: The Multiverse anymore. It now has enough products and it's doing well enough that we don't need to. We can just make it self-sustaining.
Right. That's great.
And so we did.
So that's awesome. So it sounds like you got to the point. I mean, what an amazing story, right? So you got to the point where you're able to launch it, make the game self-sustaining, and then sort of organically grow Greater Than Games over time, right? And responsibly. How did you sort of manage, the desire to do a million things at once and also, keep managing Greater Than Games responsibly? How did you not just go crazy and do something that has crashed so many companies in the past? How did you keep yourself under control?
Well, fortunately, a big part of it, the thing that really helped us was we didn't pay ourselves for a long time.
That'll help.
Yeah, right. Well, because this was never supposed to be a career for us. So like Adam still had his job in California, and Paul still had his job in St. Louis. And I had, in Kansas City, I had actually gone back to school to get my teaching accreditation, because the thing that I had found that I had loved, I'd been bouncing from career to career, and the thing that I found that I'd loved was teaching, especially high school age students. I really like high school students in terms of they have the great apex of potential and responsibility, where I can say, look, here's your assignment, do the thing. If you don't do it, I'll give you a bad grade. Hey. Had gotten a lot of positive responses working with kids. So yeah, I'd gone back to do that, and I was like, you know what? I can become a high school teacher in my 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s. I have one shot at doing this now. I'm going to drop everything and focus solely on this. So by the spring of 2011, when we were still like getting the files to the printer, the response had been so big from so many people. I went full time for Greater Than Games for no pay, and that was kind of like the manpower that we had to get us started, where both Paul and Adam were able to, on the side of their regular jobs, while doing their regular jobs, then when they were home from their jobs, do the various work they had to do. Adam just drawing nonstop all the time. And I kind of filled in everything else. So when we get started, we received, the 7 pallets worth of games to make up the first print run. And I remember we got it early July in 2011. It was over 100 degrees outside, and we had a little 10-foot cube cargo space, storage space, and a public storage locker that we had rented for the company to accept the shipment of this. And so a truck shows up, and they're like, "Oh, you don't have a lift dock a dock that we can back up to and drop this?" We're like, "Nope, we've got this thing here." They're like, "Okay, we'll have to deliver it tomorrow." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So the truck goes back. They charge us for a second day of delivery. They come back with a truck that has a lift gate, so they can put the pallets on the lift gate, drop the lift gate down to the ground, put the pallets on the ground, and then the pallets are just out there on the ground in the blistering hot July day in St. Louis. And I spent 6 hours unpacking all these pallets and lifting these boxes and walking 20 feet or something. It was actually way more than that. It was more like 30 yards from the entrance to the shipping area to the storage locker that we had in the back of the shipping area, and then just carrying these boxes back and forth until they were all packed into the storage area. Because I mean that was the only option we had, really.
Wow. And that's when you're back about again.
Right. No, it's fortunately that had been a few years, but
wow, that's awesome. Well, that just goes to show. I mean, I think so like your CEO said, it was easy, and it was pretty much straightforward to launch the whole thing. So that's good to know.
Yeah, no, and I mean, and that's the thing, is that from Paul's point of view, is like, look, so the steps of starting a company are easy. Making a company succeed is infinite work.
Really hard.
But it turns out that infinite work is my favorite type of work. So I said earlier, like, my favorite game to play is Sentinels: The Multiverse. That's not true anymore. Nowadays, my favorite game is running Greater Than Games. Well, running a company is the best game. It is a worker placement, resource management, high risk, medium reward game. Right. It's high reward, but the reward isn't necessarily monetary. The reward is like you're your own boss and you get to do all this stuff. But over the years, we've added multiple people to the company to the point that we're now 10 full-time employees.
That's awesome.
And we did a merger a few years ago with a company called Dice Hate Me Games, who you'll be talking to, the mastermind behind all that, Chris Kirkman, and he can tell you that aspect of the story. But
fantastic. So
it's been crazy times.
That's awesome, Christopher. So before we run out of time here, I do want to touch base with you. What's coming? What are you guys working on next? I mean, I know you're working on what is being billed as the final expansion of Sentinels of the Multiverse. And so,
So
what is that? So what's going on there, and how does that, at the risk of sounding like Oprah, how does that make you feel?
I mean, that's a very fine question. So I want to talk about that. Yep. I want to talk about the future, the end of the multiverse and the future of Sentinel Comics, and I also want to talk a little bit about what the future of what the current and the future of Greater Than Games as a company looks like.
Please.
That's also interesting.
Yeah,
but anyway, so Sentinels the Multiverse. So like I said in the backstory, we said, okay, we're no longer doing Kickstarter for Sentinels the Multiverse, and that was true until last spring of 2016, we launched a Kickstarter for the final Sentinels the Multiverse project, an expansion for Sentinels the Multiverse called Oblivion. And we launched this Kickstarter, and one of the big things we said right off the bat is like, hey guys, we said that we weren't going to do another Kickstarter, and it's been years since we've done a Sentinels the Multiverse Kickstarter, and yet here we are back again. What the heck? We've done multiple expansions without Kickstarter, and now we're back to Kickstarter. Why is this happening? And the answer is because it's the end. And that we've seen that Kickstarter is not just a platform for fundraising, but also is kind of a community platform. And we had a lot of really good engagement on the previous Kickstarters. And we wanted to let people know, we wanted the most reach to let people know, hey guys, the multiverse is coming to an end. Since the beginning of the multiverse, that original story that Adam and I sat down and started mapping out in that IHOP in August of 2010, had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we said, okay, well, we need to treat this game as if it's sitting on multiple decades of comic book history. We also need to treat it like if we were making this game for some other comic book company, we would say, okay, let's take a specific event. Let's take this arc of some part of your comic book publication history and focus the various products of this game on that arc and have them culminate in some big event. That's the best way to do this. So we need to craft that whole thing. And so we did. We crafted the multiverse. The within the world of Sentinel Comics, there is the multiverse event, and the game Sentinels the Multiverse and its various expansions essentially just models the multiverse event from the pages of the fictional comic book publication company Sentinel Comics. Right. And so the Oblivion is this cosmic entity that shows up at the end that creates the multiverse, essentially, that causes the multiverse by shattering the timelines, the third expansion to Sentinels the Multiverse being shattered timelines, and it creates the multiverse and then shows up at the end of the multiverse event to end all reality, and the heroes have to join forces to defeat Oblivion. And this is a story that we've been leading to, and there have been hints at it since the very beginning. There's minions of Oblivion in the very first Sentinels of the Multiverse game, in the core game. There's a couple of cards that depict things that still have not yet paid off. Everything has a payoff, and there are certain things that have not yet paid off in the card game. And we're getting to it now with Oblivion. So anyway, we put this Kickstarter on spring of last year, and we asked for $40,000 to make this final expansion, this mega expansion to Sentinels of the Multiverse, which comes with a ton of stuff. And internally, we're like, okay, guys, here's the deal. It's a Sentinels of the Multiverse expansion on Kickstarter. It's going to fund. We know it's going to fund because we're asking for $40K, but like it'll fund in the first week, and it'll probably pass $100,000. We all kind of had estimates about like how well it would do, and we're like, you know what? The highest estimates were in the like $350,000. Like, oh man, that would be crazy. That would be just like pie in the sky. But it's possible. It's not impossible. It's just super unlikely. It funded in 7 minutes.
Wow.
By the end of the first hour, we were over $100,000. And at the 24-hour mark, we were at $500,000.
Wow.
The Kickstarter ended with $1.5 million.
That is amazing. Nice. Nicely done.
Right. And
that's awesome.
Right. And the other thing that's really cool to show how we've grown as a company and who we are as a company, a lot of people look at what we do and look at our tracker, and they look at Kickstarter and they're like, oh, wow, you guys make a ton of money on Kickstarter. You had this one giant Kickstarter. That must be where all your money comes from, because there are companies that work that way, that like all of their business comes from Kickstarter. Notably, less than half of our business comes from Kickstarter. The majority of our revenue comes from sales to distributors, because when we started, we followed Phil's advice and we built the company in a way that we're on good terms with retailers and distributors. You can get our games in stores, and that's where the bulk of our games sold and the bulk of our revenue comes from even. So yeah, anyway, so that's been an exciting thing.
So as it felt, so the Kickstarter's funded, and that was last spring, you said, right?
That was last spring, and it was supposed to deliver beginning of this year, and here we are in October, and it has not yet delivered. And I just mentioned that I was doing some playtesting recently on it. It's very, very close to done. Like I have sent many files for many parts of Oblivion to the printer already. I'm sending them in batches because there's so many files. Because since we hit $1.5 million and like 10,000 plus backers, it actually ended at 9,990 something backers. It was like, oh, come on. Wow. But we had a backer kit thing in post that we let people come in on later and pledge, and we got a bunch more money and backers from that as well. So the numbers are actually much higher than what are publicly visible. Right. But anyway, so with all that, there was a ton of stretch goals, and for us, all the stretch goals were more decks, more characters, more stuff. We added so much to the project to it became by far the single biggest project we've ever done. It's actually bigger than any two projects we've ever done at the same time. Wow. And like we set a realistic expectation of how long it would take to do it. And then people are like, oh, well, it makes sense that it's late given that you had that much extra work to do. And yes, That is a part of it, but that is only half of it. The other reason that it's late is because I am a mortal being and I am very fallible. The part of the lateness of Oblivion comes from we scheduled out how much time it would take me to do all that stuff based on realistic, numbers we had, figures we had from the years of me making expansions for Sentinels of the Multiverse. The thing that we did not count on is that I had never before made the final expansion to Sentinels of the Multiverse. I'd never before killed off my baby. And that is an arduous process. It has to be perfect, I can't ever go back and do it again. I can't fix it once I put it out. Like typos and things like that. Sure, I guess we can do a second print run. I mean, we'll probably do a second print run depending on how well it sells. We have to do a huge first print run to cover all the backers, and that's great. But this expansion has to be perfect, and there have definitely been times in which I took entire concepts back to the drawing board and said, no, this can be better. This can flow better. This can model this experience better. And so I'm really thrilled now to be at the point where we're actually finishing it and I'm actually sending the final things to the printer. But I also had a time where I looked at it late last year, early this year, and I was like, here's the thing. I'm not going to have it to the printer on time. And it's more important that it's correct, that I can look back on it and I can go, yeah, past Christopher did get this out later, but he did it right, and I'm proud of the thing that came out of it, as opposed to, man, I sure got that shitty product out on time.
Yeah, well, obviously you want to end, as well as you can, note. Right? It's the final,
got in strong.
The final thing. Is there an emotional challenge too? Is there something going on there where you're like, man, this is the last Sentinels thing I'm probably ever going to do?
So it is, yeah, I mean, yes, there is that. At the same time, it's not the last Sentinels thing that I'm going to do. There are two parts of that are still going forward. I am doing a Sentinels of the Multiverse card game engine game for the RPG publisher Green Ronin. Their Mutants and Masterminds setting I am making into a card game for them, a game that is called Sentinels of Earth Prime. And so I still get to play around in that game design, game engine space. So it's not like I'm done with the game engine. So there is still that. And there are other future plans that are various levels of secret that may or may not involve that engine because, hey, it's a good engine and people like it and I like designing for it. So there's that. Additionally, some things that I mentioned earlier, that the multiverse event, the Sentinels of the Multiverse card game, is a part of the story of Sentinel Comics. But there's also a future to Sentinel Comics. So Sentinel Comics is the name of the company that publishes the comic books that the game Sentinels of the Multiverse is based on. And Sentinel Comics doesn't exist as a company. It does exist. I do own the trademark and the imprint of that. That's a thing that we made sure we owned from day one, because if it ever went anywhere, and now it is, we wanted to make sure that we had that. But Sentinel Comics has kind of always existed alongside the world of Sentinels of the Multiverse. And for the last few years, I've been working with quite the super team, actually, on a role-playing game, a tabletop, pen and paper, dice rolling role-playing game in the world of Sentinel Comics, using the characters and the stories from the Sentinels of the Multiverse game to play this RPG. But it's also moving forward. The start of the Sentinel Comics role-playing game begins after the end of the multiverse event. So everything that's happened in the card game leads up to it. And characters are different. There's some big things that happen that change in the world of Sentinel Comics.
So the end is a new beginning. See how you did that?
Yeah. That was very comic booky.
That's very clever. See, Superman's not really dead. He's just back and different. Right? That's awesome. Well, Christopher, so anything else? I mean, can you share anything else big coming from Greater Than Games? Obviously, the RPG is huge. Everybody's excited about that.
Yes, so the RPG is big and it's coming out, and actually we have a starter kit for the RPG that's coming out around in the next couple of months here, and then we'll have the RPG itself on Kickstarter, the core game for that on Kickstarter, and we're doing the starter kit before the Kickstarter so that if people want to know what the game's like, they're like, okay, I like Sentinels of the Multiverse, or I don't like Sentinels of the Multiverse, but either way, I'm interested potentially in this RPG, but do I really want to back it and back it at a high level for a lot of things, or back it at a low level for just the core hardcore game or what, well, great. Pick up the starter kit for $20 from our website or from your friendly local retailer and play the game and decide for yourself if this is for you. And if it is, great, back it. And if it's not, don't back it. Like, I don't want you to spend money for a thing you don't want. Like, come on. I want to like be good stewards. We know we have a lot of fans, and we have a lot of people that are very interested in the multiverse. And I want to be good stewards of those people and of those people's money. I don't want people spending money on things they ultimately don't want. Yeah, so that's what's going on with the RPG. At the same time, we have a lot of other big things going on with Greater Than Games. In that we have this year we have had 3 products that were all kind of gambles. One of them was we had 3 games: a game called Laser Riders, a game called Spirit Island, and a game called Fate of the Elder Gods. And all 3 of these games were big projects for us one way or another, of various speeds. Spirit Island took 5 years. Laser Riders took 1 year. Laser Riders is a very fast design turnaround, and Spirit Island has been around since like 2012 for us. So they've all been big products, and we launched all 3 of those just before Gen Con this year. We had all 3 at Gen Con, and we're like, oh man, it would be really great if one of these games took off. And all 3 of them have taken off. All 3 of them have been received really well. People have been really into them. They've been getting a lot of good chatter in the industry, all for very different reasons because they're very different games. And so that is exciting, and we have future plans that involve those things. And we also have other games such as Legends of Sleepy Hollow that we're looking to make in the very near future. So
that's fantastic, and that's a great segue, Christopher. So later in this episode, right after Total Fangirl, we're going to hear from other folks at Greater Than Games, and we're going to dive deep into this thing that is Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So Christopher, thank you so much for taking time out of your obviously very busy schedule, and we apologize to fans
and the spear fighting circuit.
And the spear fighting circuit.
Oh, I've been out of that for years, unfortunately.
And we apologize to Sentinels of the Multiverse fans who we have distracted Chris from finishing Oblivion here for yet another couple hours, so we apologize. But Christopher, thank you so much for spending time on the show with us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Especially how busy you obviously are.
Exactly.
Oh, there's a lot. It keeps me off the street.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, Total Fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakelin and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. Our shout out today is actually to a specific listener. I want to give a shout out to Andre in Hamburg. Thank you so much for listening, Andre, and we hope we keep entertaining you for many more episodes to come. So this week's episode for me is going to be about a question that I actually got on Twitter, and it has to do with the opening to my little bit on the D6 generation, where I say Han shot first, Starbuck is a guy, and Lestat, now there's a vampire. Somebody who didn't know the history that actually asked me, like, okay, so do you not like the new Battlestar Galactica? Is that why you don't, why do you say that? And I thought I should clarify because I'm like, that's kind of a good question. So I liked the new Battlestar Galactica. I thought it was not really true to the original in so very many ways. I didn't like a lot of the changes, and I thought it got a little crazy wonky, but I did like it. But my issue was just that I didn't like that they made some of the characters that were men into women, and I felt like it messed with things a little bit, and particularly because I had the world's biggest crush on Dirk Benedict back in the day when he was the one true Starbuck on the original Battlestar Galactica. So it was not so much that I am anti Katie Sackhoff and didn't like her as Starbuck, more that I am pro Dirk Benedict and feel that he was the perfect guy for the role. But I did like the new Battlestar Galactica, and people were talking about it the other day. It's come up somehow. That show recently keeps coming up, people chattering about it and asking different questions and, revisiting it to see whether it was good or not. And I thought about it, like, would I revisit that show? And I don't know that I would, because there was a lot that I really wasn't keen on about it. Sometimes when a show gets too deeply into itself, almost, for lack of a better description, that it starts to become like trying too hard to be meaningful, and it stops being entertaining. And sometimes that's what the new Battlestar did for me. It got a little too much like it was trying to get some overarching message that just hit you over the head with it. It's like, I just kind of want a little bit of entertainment in my sci-fi show if we could have that. And I think the original one had a little bit more the entertainment factor, a little bit more the fun factor. And I still, I know it's cheesy. And when you revisit that, ye gads, that is dated. That does not, the effects and some of it just does not hold up at all. But no matter how good the new one was, and no matter how you felt about the old one, my beginning is not a slight against the new Starbuck, but more it acknowledges the fact that the one true Starbuck was a guy, and he was played by Dirk Benedict.
You're listening to the Dice Tower Network at Dicetowernetwork.com. More fun than Merchant of Venus. Wait, what? Who writes these?
Well, hey, welcome back. And, of course, it is a Greater Than Games Day here today, Craig, is it not?
It is. It's a great day. It's a greater than great. It's a greater than great games day.
It is. And we have, I feel like it's like half the Greater Than Games company now has been on this show.
It's like a battalion.
So now we have, let me make sure I get this right here. So we got Chris Kirkman, Matt Riddle, and Ben Pinchback. Did I get everybody's names right?
Yep.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
I'm feeling completely lucky. So, gentlemen, we have to ask each of you that we ask this question of all of our first-time guests on the show. So, because there are three of you, it is a panel, as it were. What we're going to do here is just really briefly.
It's a tight third chair is what that is.
It's a very tight third chair. They're kind of all squished in there. I need to ask all of you, are you now or have you ever been a gamer? Let's start with Ben. Ben, how did you get your start in gaming?
Pretty much my whole life. I've been playing board games with family my whole life, and then obviously video games and everything growing up in college. The hobby market games probably for the last 10 years now, I would say. Catan led to Board Game Geek, which led to Power Grid and Puerto Rico and all those. And so I've been gaming forever. Not so much time for video games right now, but it's not because I don't love them. I do. It's more of a time thing. But
and Ben, yeah. What was the game that started it all? What was that first game, your earliest memory of a game that would not be considered like Monopoly or checkers? What's the first hobby game you got into?
Funny enough, my older brother taught me chess when I was really young. Yeah. So we grew up playing.
Classical place to start.
A classic, yes.
Of course. If you play many of my games, that wouldn't surprise you. I've been a dry, soulless, abstract Euro type my whole life.
Dry and soul. See,
that's the best sales pitch we've ever heard on the show.
And Ben, you've been doing games for a little while now. Let the listeners know what some of the games you've worked on in the past.
Yeah, if you've played a card game called Fleet, that was our very first game, and up until recently our most famous. I would say probably Wasteland Express Delivery Service is probably our most famous now. That one just came out at Gen Con this year from Pandasaurus. It was the one with the Mad Max theme with the pick up and the cool art and the awesome molded trucks and the game trays and the whole thing. Yep. So, if you've heard of me and Matt, we designed together. You've probably heard of Fleet or Wasteland Express up to this point.
Cool. And Matt, how about yourself? How did you get involved in gaming?
Very similar. Ben and I are both Michigan kids, born and raised. So my earliest memories of every family gathering is playing some sort of card game. From euchre to rummy to contract rummy, Michigan rummy, 7 million rummies, screw your neighbor, poker, anything. We always played cards with our uncles and aunts and cousins and my family with my sisters and my parents. So my entire life, if there was a card game to be played, we were playing it. Hearts, spades, all of it, pinochle even, not bridge, but still, that wouldn't be surprising. And I did that just because we loved it, and that was something that we always did growing up. And then we had the normal board games, the Monopoly, and then eventually Risk and a few things like that. I think the first, to kind of piggyback off what Ben said, the first time, I was making that same transition with Ben, where we played Settlers for a while and then Power Grid and the other kind of ones. But I think the first game I would truly consider where I felt like it was next level was Lord of the Rings Risk. And because as much as I loved Risk, Lord of the Rings took it to a new space where you were putting these cards together to make your sets, to turn your set in for armies, and it was just such a fantastic game. And that was kind of one of the ones that was early, kind of as we're coming out of college, that kind of led into finding Settlers and some of the other games we played.
That's awesome. It's amazing how many Risk spin-off games are actually very not Risk. As they evolve over time.
Yeah,
Risk.
I mean, Risk is such a great. I mean, there's a very specific and simple concept, with obviously just the area control. But then they've found so many ways to spin it, and some of them are really, really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, Chris, how about yourself? How did you get involved in gaming?
Well, it's similar. I mean, I've just been playing games my entire life. My mom and I used to play games constantly, and I think my very first gaming memory was a game that I actually was given as a present from a friend a couple of years ago for my birthday called Sammy the White House Mouse. And I think I was maybe 4 but I remember that game so vividly. And unfortunately, I no longer had my copy, but she gave me a copy for my birthday, and I proudly displayed now. So I've just been in board games constantly, and I've always just sought to find that next big thing. And so I kept escalating all of my games. And then I think, obviously I played on New Year's Eve. We always had a tradition New Year's Eve for like Battleship and Scrabble and all kinds of things. The big turning point for me was, I think, 1987 when I got Fortress America, and then I got into Car Wars.
Oh yeah.
And that was kind of sent me just got my wheels spinning. I was designing variants for Car Wars, and Hero Quest came soon after that, and I designed like a gladiatorial combat system within Hero Quest and all kinds of different things like that. So yeah, there was the great kind of a glory age of these new, Milton Bradley bringing out the Game Master series with Fortress America and obviously Axis and Allies, and then we had Steve Jackson with Car Wars and some of those deeper ones. So that's where I kind of got my cut my teeth, so to speak, in the heavier games that led into hobby gaming.
Sweet. Now, Matt and Ben are, of course, designers and done quite a few games. Chris, what would you describe your job as at Greater Than Games? Like, what do you actually do every day? What's it look like?
My job, I wear a lot of hats because, obviously I used to just be me on Dice Hate Me Games, but when we merged with Greater Than Games, my official title is Game Development Director, which essentially means that I still scout for games. I talk to designers. I keep my ears to the ground in the design community, and I take submissions. But then from that process, I work with the designers and help them to refine the designs. I talk about I work with the team to hone marketability and just basically turn it into a real product and a real game and get it in front of playtesters, taking it to Unpub and obviously working with the designers, which they work tirelessly. Matt and Ben have been working on Legends of Sleepy Hollow like constantly for 2 years now. And so it's nice to be able to take that level of commitment from them and then just, they bounce ideas off me and I give my input and try to craft the games in such a way that they're smoother, they're going to be better and improved, and we have just a great product to put out there for gamers. So that's essentially what I do, the core of what I do, but I do a lot of other things too.
Well, that's a great description. That's a great segue because obviously today we do want to talk about the new hotness coming from Greater Than Games, which of course is the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. The Kickstarter's kicking off. It'll be live by the time this show airs. So how did Matt and Ben, how did this idea come to be? Where did the concept of why Sleepy Hollow and what's sort of the elevator pitch for what the Legend of Sleepy Hollow is?
The elevator pitch is that it's an adventure. It's a co-op adventure. The story picks up where the Washington Irving story ends, where Ichabod has gone missing. So basically, you're the townsfolk, and you're going to gather together and search and try to find Ichabod. And the end of the story leaves it kind of to chance whether it's really supernatural or if it was just Brom Bones with like his coat pulled over his head.
Right.
Well, we take the angle that it was real. It's all real. There's trees swinging at you and spirits.
Spoilers. No, I'm just
Spoilers. So you're the townsfolk. You're going to gather together and do these adventures, and it's a persistent campaign. So you're actually going to level up and improve your characters through the campaign. So right now you go chapter to chapter, and when you beat a chapter, there's upgrades you're presented, and there's items and skills, that you improve, and your skill bar gets better. And the inspiration really was Matt and I back in, 10, 12 years ago, Matt. We used to play a massive multiplayer online game, kind of like World of Warcraft, but ours was Guild Wars, if you remember that one.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to play this for, hundreds of hours, through the campaigns. And we just loved, you party together with your friends and you just go do these adventures. So kind of trying to bring that feel to the tabletop. And mechanically, we can talk later about maybe how it feels a little bit like that. But that was really the adventure, the inspiration for the game. And then thematically, it just kind of hit me one day. I was researching different old literature and stuff, open source, public domain stuff, and kind of hit me that, wow, there's no awesome Sleepy Hollow game, that I can find in the database. And it's like, told Chris about it and Matt, and away we went.
Great. Now, Chris, how did you get involved in this project? Was this something that started out as a greater than game, or did Matt and Ben, you have to pitch it, or how did that all come to be?
It was Grand Con in Grand Rapids, Michigan of 2015, and Matt and Ben were there, and we were just going to, talk about a few different things and play games together. But then they had mentioned to me that they wanted to play a campaign game or a scenario-based game, and so we were originally going to play Last Night on Earth. I was just going to show them because I've had a lot of experience playing those games, and they hadn't, and they had this idea to develop the game. And they didn't have it in the library, so we ended up playing Zombicide. And so we were just sitting talking, and Ben started, going riffing on Sleepy Hollow. And I was like, I've always wanted, I love Sleepy Hollow. And just that my mind started spinning at like the story you could do in the sequel, and I right on the spot, I said, yeah, let's do this game. So from that point on, they kept developing it. We played the first couple of chapters. It was obviously just a ton of fun, and they just kept working from beyond that. So I've been kind of, I guess, I don't know, guys, what would you call my role in this? More like a world builder, or that sounds grandiose.
Almost like, no, that's true, but almost like the lead writer too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so developer too, for sure. It definitely, this was a different one for us, because not obviously, but it just, the way it usually works, frankly, is you take a finished product, which for game designers is a game and a rule set, and you show it to publishers, and if they like it, they ask for more information, and you sign it that way. This truly was, Ben had showed me, kind of his core idea, which is really what was built, Sleepy Hollow was built on, which is an action selection system where you upgrade your skills, and there's we can get into some of the fear and things that you do that drive how you can pick actions. There's a kind of a refresh rate, and it's a really neat system that Ben kind of had this idea for, and had just started sort of like he said, he kind of found Sleepy Hollow as kind of an underused IP, and was able to take this kind of core system that he thought of, and that we built the game from the ground up. And when we talked to Chris at Grand Con, we had barely started. It was really early. So Chris, an unusually large amount has been involved since day one. As far as, again, world building and development, and kind of working with us on, kind of how to take the story so that we could make sure as we drove through our scenarios, which, are each one's incredibly unique. We're not just going to have you play the same exact little structure of game, X times. It's each time we give it a new twist, and that's all based on how that story progresses, which Chris had a lot to do with. So it was really, really fun for us to kind of work that way.
Oh, I like that. I think these kind of games, especially when you're describing it as persistent, you have to have really good writing and storytelling. So it sounds like you've got that already baked in. That's fantastic. So how would you guys classify this thing? And you gave us the elevator pitch. Is it a co-op? Is it a dungeon crawl outside? What does it feel like when you play it?
It's definitely full co-op. You're going to play with the characters. There's, the 4 primary characters, and I'll let, Ben maybe get into a little more detail on those. And you're going to play as a group, trying to, work through each of these scenarios, each of these chapters, as we call them, that have a very specific set of, kind of goals and rules with a bunch of really awesome twists, mind you. And it's, I guess I would, you could put it akin to a dungeon crawl, but it's, I think a little bit less about the exploration that usually occurs in a dungeon crawl, and more about kind of experiencing and unveiling the story as you, again, try to find Ichabod.
So the map is sort of known. Is the map pretty constant, or does the board sort of evolve as you play?
Each chapter will have a completely unique map.
Oh, cool. Very cool. And then you're experiencing a story that's going to reveal unexpected twists, both in the story but also in gameplay?
Right.
Exactly.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
So not the same as Time Stories, but if you're familiar with what you can do with a deck of cards, it's kind of funny when we had this idea. We've been kicking around for years, and then when you start telling people about it, they're like, "Oh, like Time Stories," and you're like, "What? Yeah, I guess kind of.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, it is kind of." But we call ours the Legend deck. So each chapter has like a Legend deck, unless Chris has renamed it in the last little week. But it's a really slick thing you can do with, I mean, cards are the best. Me and Matt, like you said, we love cards. When you're walking through these chapters, there's different triggers on the maps that will send you to the Legend deck. So like, go pick up card 7, and card 7 might be this rickety old chair that you can beat bad guys up with, or card 7 might be like spawn, you know, some bad guys, or go pull card 15. And like, there's so many different things that can happen when you send people to the deck. So that's just kind of mechanically one way to drive the action, and it works super well for both surprises and then like just pushing each chapter along, you know.
Very cool. And I do want to get into more details on the mechanics, because you've already been hinting at some neat things I'd like to jump in on. But one more thing is, you think about what's in the box, and I'm trying to imagine the board now. One of the things that mentions on the announcement page there on the Greater Than Games website, it talks about miniatures in the box. And how important did you feel that including miniatures in the game were to your concept?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll probably field that one. You're in this gaming environment and atmosphere. To succeed on Kickstarter, you got to have some flash. And a lot of people gravitate toward miniatures. I'm an old miniatures wargamer. I played 40K for years, and so I have that miniatures fever. When I see something really cool, I'm like, oh, I want to paint that. You know, we just recently did miniatures for Fate of the Elder Gods, and so this just sort of lent itself to that, because when you think about a campaign-based story game, you just imagine miniatures, and a lot of people do that as well. And so we felt that it was pretty important that we found a good miniatures artist and had a good concept artist to build the world out. And we feel like it's kind of gelled together pretty well from that. But I'll tell you, playing the game with standees has been fun too, because it's got just such a quirky feel to it when you're moving these standees around on the board. But the minis are super cool, and they're gonna be a lot of people are going to really, really love them when they see them.
And are you looking at it? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Craig.
I was just going to say, on your website, you've got these beautiful rotating designs to see these first 4 minis, and they do look. I don't think there's a single character of these 4 that I wouldn't want to play.
Well, that's good to hear.
They all look very cool and characterful.
I think that's really key too, because I think one of the things that Ben kind of hinted at was that you're going to be able to drive your characters in different directions, and as you upgrade them, you're going to have choices on how you want to play the character that you've selected, and then not to mention playing it again with a different character. And we took some very standard character types. You got a monk, and you've got a tank, and you've got your ranged archer, and you've got your kind of like would be a caster, but in our case it's weapon based. But we allow you to really kind of tweak how you play them based on the upgrade system as you finish these chapters, and not only are you going to be finding things that you can use throughout the course of the story, but again, like Ben said, as you finish a chapter, you're going to be presented with these opportunities to drive how your character plays for the next time you play. And in doing that, we wanted to make sure that you had a way that you could kind of really uniquely identify with your character. So having minis that frankly are incredibly well done, to me, I think was important, because I'm a visual person, and I can see, if I'm Jeremiah, I can see Jeremiah, and that's me, and that's my character, and I've got my art in front of me, and I have my mini on the board, and he's got good detail, and I can sort of kind of get involved in the story just visually by kind of following him around as I move him around the map. So I love the standees too, and like Ben said, I mean, we grew up in the gaming industry with playing these dry soulless kinesias where you move cubes around, and I love them. I can play those all day. I mean, I love pushing cubes. But when we're really telling a story like this, I think it was really important that you had that visual element, and the minis being as good as they are, frankly, really helps that out a lot.
So what is going to dazzle people when they open this box, right? You're going to obviously cards, obviously some miniatures. What are you looking at when you pop this thing open? What's really going to pop out to people?
A lot of punch board, because every single map is comprised of 4 interlocking pieces of punch boards. So you're going to have front and back of the punch boards as 8 separate interlocking, well, 4 separate interlocking maps. They'll be front and back with all this. We've got definitely the cards, custom dice that are going to be in there too. The attack dice are on a 3 chip or a 3 pip system instead of there's 6-sided dice, but you've got one side that basically has a 0 or a null roll and a 3 roll that's a 1. The rest are evenly between 1s and 2s, and so so you got the custom dice, obviously the miniatures. The thing that most people are going to realize when they open the box is they're not going to see everything. It's going to be compartmentalized. So when certain parts of the game tell them to open, say a tuck box or an envelope, or that we got lots of different systems, it will be a reveal, sort of, a little bit in the vein of like Pandemic Legacy, if you've played Pandemic Legacy, but where you're not going to be able to tell, you're not going to be able to cheat and see what's coming in the other chapters. There's going to be a storybook and some things that you'll reveal from that, but mostly the cards will be hidden. Some of the minis will be hidden. There'll be, just a lot of surprises. So that's going to be I think the biggest thing that people will probably note is the fact that they're not going to be able to see everything right off the bat.
I like that already. So, I think some people might be worried that, well, can you replay the game? Do you have a replayability thing? But I love the feeling of discovery as you play a game and you open more components, right? Does the way you seal this, does it prevent someone from reading the wrong paragraph too soon? So I was just just funny story. So I was just on the Dice Tower chatting with Tom and Eric. They had me on as a guest host, and we were talking about, I'm always constantly extol the praises of Seafall because they don't really care for it, and I'm like one of the few people that actually enjoys the game just because of the story. But Tom was sharing a story where someone accidentally turned to the last page and read the ending because they they transposed the numbers of the paragraph they were supposed to read. And the whole table's like, what did you just read to us? So does that prevent it in yours, or is that accidentally possible also?
It's possible if somebody really wanted to cheat, yes. Yeah. But it's not in such a way where you're cross-referencing a lot of different numbers and you could get mixed up. The actual chapter mats and the stories that's being told is linear. So there are definitely non-linear elements in some of the scenarios, but those are handled by the cards, and those are sealed so that nobody can cheat. And they're numbered on the back, and you can pull them so you don't pull the wrong one. Yeah, you could if you messed up the number, but nothing is 100% foolproof. But yeah, we've taken steps to make sure that people are following this, chapter by chapter and not being able to just ruin the whole thing right off the bat.
That's great. Now, in regards to the miniatures real quick, because I'm a total, Craig and I are both huge miniature fans, so we have to admit we do get attracted to the shiny board game that has lots of plastic in it. There's obviously miniatures for the 4 main characters. Are there miniatures for the bad guys as well?
There are, yes. And there are 2 known bad guys at this time. I will not speak of any more, but there are the Gobkins and the Shrickroots. And so the Gobkins are sort of animated. They're all vegetation-based bad guys, but they're animated sort of vines and pumpkins that have formed sort of this shambling skeleton-like mass. I'm not sure if you've seen pictures of it yet, but they're the big bads in the chapter 1 anyway. And Shrickroots are animated tree trunks and trees that have come to life, and these things are all being controlled by external forces, and that's what the bad guys that the heroes have to fight right off the bat. And we'll have those, and we'll actually be showing those on the Kickstarter page as well. We'll have rotating pictures of those like the heroes as well.
That's cool. Are the bad guys compartmentalized so in the box so you can't see future bad guys in the campaign, or do you at least know the back? Oh, that's awesome. See, I'm already sold. Where do I click? Where's the back button? Where do I click? Well, let me ask you this, and I don't know who wants to field this, so guys jump in. But what does a typical turn feel like? What's sort of the typical player turn look like in
I'll go for that. Yeah. I'll go for this. So the turn progresses in that everybody is going to take a turn, which is basically do an action, and then the game takes its action. And then you repeat until, you either solve, finish the chapter or you fail. In every chapter, the game has, maybe Chris has a better word for it, but I've always called it the game mat. Like chapter 1 has a game mat, and it's a little AI or set of rules that the game does when it's its turn. So, we all take a turn, the 4 of us, and now it's the game's turn. Well, most of it is very simple. It would say something like move, attack, spawn. So you'd move all the bad guys based on the rules. They would attack if they're in range, and then roll the spawn dice, look at the check, and then spawn more bad guys. So like chapter 1, that would kind of be the pacing.
So it's kind of like the villain card in Sentinels of the Multiverse, right? It's sort of a mat that tells you how the bad guy runs, and they're different.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Yep. So each chapter is going to have slightly different rules. So then on a player turn, it's very simple. You have a little action mat in front of you, and you're going to be sliding action tokens around to take certain basic and advanced actions. And the basic actions, if you go back to your RPG, like you're the Undertaker, you're Jeremiah, and you run around and you hit bad guys with a shovel. Well, like basic smash is an action you can take over and over, but like your heavy smash or your wild smash, like your better, souped up actions, once you take them, they have a bit of a cooldown, kind of like back to our video game, because every player has a certain amount of action tokens on their mat. So they might have 5 or 4 depending on the character. Well, once I've spent an action token, I don't get a refresh until I've spent all my actions. So you actually have to manage your souped up awesome skills, because once you use them, they're going to be clogged until you use all your actions, right? So then you're going to be left using your basic skills. And I'll just say it now, my favorite part of the game is the sphere mechanism. So Chris mentioned the bad guys, the animated tree is swinging at you and these, gobkin things with the viney whatevers. And well, when you get attacked in this game, you get fear. You're afraid, because the whole thing about Sleepy Hollow is about fear and ghosts and apparitions. When you take fear in this, so you have damage, which, you die if you run out of health, but you also take fear, which actually goes into your action pool. So it simulates, the more afraid I am, the more depleted mentally I am. I can get to the point where I'm basically useless wandering around doing the basic action, because I have all this fear to go through in my action pool, and they spend like actions. And if, I don't heal up or rest, or if Elijah, the minister's not doing his job to heal me of the fear, I'm not getting back to my awesome actions. That's kind of the pacing of the game.
How does a player shed his fear or her fear so they don't get frustrated by being sort of like locked out?
Well, that's the job of the minister primarily.
Right.
There is rests. There's mead. I don't think it's a spoiler to say there's things like mead you can pick up that items. There's item drops that can clear it for you. And then, like I said, the minister is cool. Someone said it the other day, Chris, I think it was you. They're like, hey, so-and-so said the minister is actually fun.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, he's a blast to play.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some cool attacks too, and depending, like Matt said, how you build him, right? We're going to give you opportunities for your minister to go a little left-hand turn, here and there if you want him to be doing more damage. But, back to when we would do these MMORPGs, the minister, the monks back in our time really was the team leader. I mean, he led and controlled the action and was really did a lot of the control in helping people out. So I actually really love playing that character personally. I don't know, Riddle does, but I do.
Yeah, they tease me because I always kind of make fun of monks, because that's always felt like it was like the lamest character. But I will say, it is actually quite fun to be the minister. Now, Ben used to have a character. I mean, as much as he liked to say it was a monk in our old game, he called it "Heal Yourself, Yo," because he did no healing. So he was an entire monk. All he did was like fight and spite. So people would bring him to their party thinking he was going to be healing, and he would do none of it. And so he's not totally blameless here. But yeah, to his point though, you really can create these characters in different ways.
That's
and
great. So you have different build paths. So you can make someone who's more of the healer or more of the combat medic or whatever. Yeah, that's cool.
100%. I also think too, one of the reasons fear is such an interesting mechanic is because these aren't like your movie video game, like, barbarian. I mean, these are real life characters that have been, kind of come to Sleepy Hollow to kind of explore this mystery, but it's an undertaker and a minister and a tanner, and we have a Civil War vet. So these are real
revolution.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I'm sorry, Revolutionary War vet, different time period. That have come to Sleepy Hollow and really have an opportunity to kind of experience this adventure, but they're not these kind of fake giant muscle ripped shoulder fakey characters. These are real, honest to goodness, local folks that are kind of experiencing this with you.
Real life historical figures battling squash. That's exactly what happened.
There's your tagline right there.
There it is, right there. You can use that. So what is everybody's favorite mechanic? So we already heard from one of you. What are the other two? What's your favorite? What are you most proud of? What mechanic really sets this game apart from others people may have played that are similar?
I think the action bar. I really do think that's the one thing that's significantly, fun, and because it's such a big part of gameplay that you kind of manage, not just managing your fear. I mean, that is part of it, but I mean, it's really the timing of using these special skills. So as you go through the game and you kind of change and expand on these skills that you have that are above and beyond your normal attacks or your normal, heals and such, it's really fun to say, okay, this is the moment I'm going to use. When I play Jeremiah, I love the wild smash, and it's frankly a statistically unlikely hit, but it's gigantic when it hits. And it's just one of the things that I really, I love it. It's just a really fun moment for me when you get to kind of time, those perfect opportunities to use those special skills.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't think I can add much more to that. I mean, it really is the heart of the game. The fear system and the action selection system, they work together so well, and it just feels so good when you play, and very thematic too, of slowing you down from fear, taking fear from these weird, strange things you're getting, surrounded by. And so I think it's an awesome system.
Very cool.
Sounds awesome.
So Craig has a phrase that he uses from writing, which is murder your darlings, which is this idea that you have to leave behind some of your favorite ideas sometimes to make things better.
Sometimes the hardest part.
Right. So what was one of your favorite mechanics or ideas or concepts that actually ended up not making it into the final version because it just didn't really work out as you'd hoped?
I'll jump in here first. I was thinking about this one. Chris killed one of my babies, which was this series. It was this robe that the minister could get, and it turned into a much more tailored down thematic thing where he can kind of like block some damage or whatever. But I had him as like this meat shield from like the back row, where it was like a sacrificial thing where he could absorb X amount of damage, for a character onto himself. If he was in range, because everybody has a range based on their abilities and the weapon they have equipped. So if he was in range, he could just absorb damage from other people. And I thought it was sweet because he could just hang out in the back and, I'll take that 3 damage for you, Jeremiah, no problem. And then, heal himself up later. And Chris convinced me it was a little unthematic and possibly a little OP. So we had to morph that one out, but I still kind of miss it.
I think in general we had a few of those moments where I'm an old school, old timey fantasy nerd. I grew up reading Piers Anthony and Tolkien and all those old fantasy books. So when we approach this world, it's really easy to start giving these characters, frankly. Obviously, we're kind of towing that line between supernatural and realistic, and that's kind of one of the fun things about Sleepy Hollow is that it's not completely magic and it's not completely real. It's a really interesting, kind of balance between the two. But it's really easy for Ben and I, or for when we're creating these kind of these items and these skills to get a little crazy, right? Like, I wanted to have because my favorite characters in all these games I've played, because I played a million of the turn-based RPGs and all the the Star Wars ones and stuff, is always the caster. I want to bring a hailstorm down or a firestorm from the sky and blow everybody up. Well, that's not that appropriate in this particular setting. So, it was definitely fun to kind of, have those moments where, either Ben to me or Chris to us saying, guys, not the best idea you've ever had, or maybe a little beyond, the kind of aura that we want to present for this game. So we had those moments throughout the process that were pretty fun.
Yeah, I guess I was mostly the axe wielder in this one.
Yeah.
So.
You were keeping the babies dead.
Bloody.
I see. Yeah, very, very nice.
Yeah, my hands are bloody. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, great. And one other thing that happens is during playtesting, oftentimes things you don't expect surface. So what was sort of the most surprising find as you started getting other people sort of playing the game and starting to really play with it and watching people, sort of watch a game come to life? What were some of the surprises you found?
I can take... go ahead, Matt.
Mine's really quick. I think overall it was interesting because Ben and I, because we design all of our games together, therefore we play test together. So it's always him and I, taking a character a piece or a couple characters each. And this is true even when we do Euros. We'll play a couple of hands each and we design and we play. And, when you play a game hundreds and hundreds of times, and frankly, the math, you designed it, it's your baby, you get pretty good at it. So one of the things that we really appreciated from Chris and from the playtesters was figuring out that balance between, having it be hard and engaging and interesting and suspenseful, but not just getting your butt kicked. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that we always can see, because you're so in it, right? So it was interesting to watch the playtesting develop or help us develop, some of the overall balance between the game and the characters, and making sure that we had it at a good level where it was winnable, but that you had to make good decisions to do it, and you weren't just getting stomped.
Yeah, something. I mean, that came up actually even with the game that we played recently at Grand Con. We were going to film a playthrough, and it actually became the essence of an idea for stretch goals and to add replayability to the game. But we were playing through and we're doing the playthrough, and it was just a perfect storm of bad spawns. We were just getting overrun by Shrickroots and Gobkins, and Matt and I just looked at it and were like, this is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. So even just continuing to play the game with other people and see how things shake out, we tweaked the chapter or the game mat for chapter 1 just a little bit, just to prevent too much of an overrun, because we want people to get into the story. Chapter 1's not a cakewalk, but we don't want it also to be completely frustrating for people. But it also made sense that we want to create, and this is getting a little bit ahead, but as far as stretch goals, we want to offer additional game mats that we could put together for the backers that would become an expansion that like, we do Fey the Elder Gods, that they will get all together, bound together with possibly some new cards and things like that, that actually allow you to replay the entire, storyline on heroic and legendary mode.
Oh, cool.
And so, yeah, so the chapter mat will actually, accelerate, and we have this little tracking combat damage system that goes on the bottom of the minis that basically, you just rotate around so you don't have to keep up with anything. It's all right on the mini. And they can have, other sides that have asterisks and things that can be activated by the game mats in heroic and legendary mode. And those can be just for the hardcore gamers that want to run through it again. And that was just the seed of an idea that we saw by playing through it and seeing how it could really be one of those hairbreadth moments where you just got to survive.
Right.
And
very cool. That's a great segue into, you mentioned stretch goals, into the Kickstarter itself. So obviously Kickstarter's live now. Hopefully it's kicking butt. We're recording this just before it's going live. But why did you?
It's not really live to us, but it's live to you guys.
Obviously Greater Than Games has done quite a few Kickstarters. Why a Kickstarter for this one? What were you guys thinking about when you decided to go with Kickstarter?
Well, it's one of those things where, especially this type of game, it has the potential for a greater market share by going through Kickstarter. It's going to have visibility, and the Kickstarter, I guess the people who are on Kickstarter are looking for these types of games. They see the co-ops and the story-based campaign games and something different that's out there with nice miniatures and a cool world, and especially spooky at this time of year, and a very beloved IP in the public domain, that we think that it just has the pedigree to do well on Kickstarter, which allows us obviously to make more games, which is what we want to do, to get it in more people's hands and have more people have fun with it. So from all those aspects, it just made sense for us to try to do this one on Kickstarter to engage an audience, a wider audience.
That's fantastic. Oh, you mentioned the look of the game too. I wanted to bring this up. The art. I love the art style. Tell us a little bit about how the art style got into the game. Was it something that was there from the beginning? Did it come a little later? How did that happen?
It's funny because Matt's probably the one to tell this story, because he was the biggest critic of all the arts and stuff we were looking for. But we had a specific sort of look we wanted to go for. But was it Gen Con last year, guys? It was 2016.
Yeah, Gen Con last year. Yes.
Yeah. So we all took a stroll with Jen Clausen, who's our art director, creative director at Greater Than Games, and we all took a stroll. And Adam Rabataro, who's one of the co-owners but also artist, and we just looked through Artist Alley at Gen Con, and we point to something, we say, oh, that's and Jen and I are graphic designers, so we kind of get that graphic designer, little kind of artsy fartsy type of style we like. That's what Matt would call it, I think. I'm not going to put words in his mouth.
I think that's pretty fair.
And Matt is, high
it's
fantasy.
It's a technical term of art, I believe.
It is.
Artsy fartsy.
I'm gonna intercede on Chris's story here. So basically, the whole point was to drag us around, because again, Jen and Chris, who are both in this all the time and are more artsy, they've seen this very stylized in this this really. I'm sure it's good, but I'm real simple. All right, I'm a dummy. It's either good or it sucks. There's really not I either like it or I don't, and I can't tell you why because I'm not an art critic and I'm not an artist, but I just want to see something that I think is cool. So it was, for me, it was very binary. Like I like that, I don't like that. So I think all I could provide to them was, like art for dummies level kind of. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. I don't really like that very much, but it was just fun because it was interesting to see those guys really geek out. And some of the stuff is very cool, but man, I just, I love that high fantasy, bright, shiny, kind of big character art. And I think where we ended up, and I'll let Chris kind of finish, is, a kind of a nice mix where it is a little bit more of a stylized art. And I do too. I love the art. And I tell the story in the context of the fact that our game that we just released, that we talked about earlier, Wasteland Express Delivery Service, is an art style that I don't particularly like, frankly. I can appreciate that it's really good, but it's not for me. It's not something that I enjoy. Where this is really, I really truly do love the art that they've chosen for Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, and Abigail Larson is our main artist, our character artist and world artist for Legends of Sleepy Hollow, and it was Jennifer kind of came across her, and we were looking for that mix like Matt mentioned, and we wanted something a little quirky, kind of Tim Burton-esque, that could allow us to be a little bit, if we're going to have animated, like you said, squash, if we're fighting squash, we want it to have that kind of quirky feel to it, so you won't feel like it's a complete departure from reality, and it's in this kind of cool otherworldly type of feel, and she's captured that, I think, perfectly. She was a great find. She hadn't really had any experience or much experience doing board games things, so it's been interesting to see her process and to see the portraiture and things that she's done for the game.
Did she do the tiles too? Because the sample tile art looks awesome.
Yeah, Colin Chan, actually, this is a recommendation from Nolan Nasser, who is a fantastic artist. He did art for New Bedford and Fate of the Elder Gods, and we just love him to death. But I asked him for a recommendation because he wasn't taking any new freelance work at the time, and he recommended a friend of his, Colin Chan, and so he's been doing the tiles. And so we showed him Abigail Larson's art and said, we want you to try to emulate her style, and he's nailed it.
He really did. You would never know it was two different artists. So Abigail did all the sort of the drawings of the people and the figure, right, concepts, and he did the tiles.
Yep, absolutely.
It looks what a great match. Boy, they're really good at that. That's amazing. And again, the art style is really impressive. So you guys teased a couple. Obviously, the Kickstarter started on the 17th of October. Is it a 30-day Kickstarter? How long are you guys planning to run this thing?
I wish I had a defend. No, I'm just kidding. We probably will be a 30-day. We're still talking about that. Paul and I had a meeting about that today. We were trying to decide whether we're going to run it all the way through the end of PAX Unplugged and end it that Sunday night the end of PAX Unplugged. And I think that we probably will do that because we want to be able to show the game off there and allow extra backed pledges in the last 48 hours while it's going on. So
that's awesome. Yeah. I'll be at PAX Unplugged, so I'll swing by for a demo because that'd be great.
Awesome. Yeah, come say hey.
So what are some of the stretch goals? You hinted at some different sort of mats there for the missions, but what else are you guys thinking about? Can you share any of the stretch goals this time, or are you keeping them?
We've got a few surprises, but I mean, like I said, one of the main things we wanted to do was add. We like to add more. Replayability and content when we can, not just things that don't make any sense. People have a lot of like add-ons, and some of the campaigns just a lot of fluff. And definitely we want to try to, as we continue through the stretch goals, we can add more and more mats and some cards and things that allow for replayability upon finishing the game. So we'll have heroic and legendary modes that we can compile into a little mini expansion for the backers. One thing that we are promoting is when we fund, we actually have a completely separate solo game that is designed by Robert Johnson called Lost in the Woods, and it retells the story of Ichabod leaving the Van Tassel mansion with the harvest party at the end of the original Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and he's got to try to make it through the woods to the covered bridge before the horseman gets him. And it's completely it's a push your luck solo game. We've got a whole set of art for that. We're going to compile it, and all backers will get it absolutely for free, and we'll offer it after the campaign in retail, but they'll get that for free as incentive and as one of the first stretch goals.
Great.
I have an idea for a stretch goal too that I'm Hope and Chris will go for. It's this robe that the minister gets. Hang back and absorb damage.
Hey, if we fund enough, we'll just offer it and we'll just say it's completely bonkers, and here you go.
It should be a foil card. It should be a foil collectible card.
Oh,
Only available at conventions, right?
Yeah.
Hey,
only can be used with your opponent's permission.
Right.
Right. Bring back Matt and Ben's broken cards. Exactly.
Right, broken cards.
Oh, Matt and Ben's broken cards, Chris. That kind of has to happen now.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
it probably will.
You're going to have a heroic and legendary Matt. That's sort of the easy mode Matt. You just give everybody the robe and you're off to the races. That's fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking time. I know you're getting ready to start the Kickstarter here. You got a lot of stuff going on. Thanks again for joining us here today.
Calm before the storm.
Yeah, if people want to find out more about you guys or what you're up to or the Kickstarter or Greater Than Games, where should they go on the internet to find all that stuff out?
You guys go ahead. I'll wrap up.
Yeah, you can find me. I'm at MD Ridlen, so that's MDRIDDLEN on Twitter, or just plain Ridlen, RIDDLEN at BGG. Ask me anything. I mean, post. I put a thread up in the CB Hollow forum that basically said that, ask me anything, just to answer questions about the game. I'm always, if you at me on Twitter, I'll answer, and we would love to talk about this, about any of our other titles, any questions you might have, rules stuff, whatever you want. Yeah, please. I'd love to talk anytime.
Yeah, this is Ben. Definitely head over to the Kickstarter, Legends of Sleepy Hollow. I'll let Chris shill for the company website and all that. But like Matt said, we hang out at Board Game Geek, subscribe to any of our games. So if you have questions about Sleepy Hollow in the forums there, we'd love to see you over there, and we'll answer any questions you have. And then we're very active on Twitter. That's kind of our social media of choice. So I'm at Pinchback21. Come, interact with us, and we'll see you over there.
Yep, and I'm Chris Kirkman, and you can always find me on Twitter at DiceHateMe. And I am very active on Twitter. It's a great community for board gaming. So anytime you want to come and talk to us about anything, you can ask me questions about any of our lines of games or just talk games in general. And of course, you can go to greaterthangames.com and check out all of our other titles, including our newly released Fate of the Elder Gods that I designed with Richard Launius and Daryl Lauder, and we had a blast with that one. And it has minis too. So
awesome. Cool. Minis are good. Cool. Well, thanks again, gentlemen. Best of luck with your Kickstarter, and I hope to be able to see you guys and at PAX Unplugged.
Yeah, we'll see you there.
Bye, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
This Did You Ever Notice is brought to you by all of our friends over at Patreon who help us keep this show going, rolling on from one episode to the next. Today, I would like to thank W. David McKenzie, Robert Dean, Ron DeVolk, Mark de Blasi, and Jed Doherty. Thank you, and thank everybody for sticking with us through the years. Do you ever notice how hard sometimes it is to figure out why exactly you're doing or not doing something? Right now, I'm in the middle of just such a wrestling match with myself. And it's been going on for, well, since Gen Con, really. And I blame, in part, Russ and Rafe, and, of course, all of you. But mainly it's just me. And here's my quandary. The CMON Kickstarter for A Song of Ice and Fire ended before Gen Con. And there were some really cool sneak peeks of models, and, of course, there were the demos at Gen Con that I couldn't get into, but still. And it is, to be brief, it is a ranked battle game where your models are, a unit is on a tray of ranked warriors, and they, including the horsemen, who are on a 2x2 tray, I think. Yes, think so. And the models are gorgeous. And you, in the base pledge, you get almost all the main characters, or many of the main characters, not even close to all the main characters, but you get a bunch of main characters, mostly aligned with the Starks and the Lannisters and those king's counselors who are sort of in the middle, kind of going on their own way. You get an awesome Iron Throne mini. and you got a lot of models. You got a really nice little army for the Lannisters and for the Starks, and a smaller group of mercenaries that are all Bolton, flayed the Bolton guys. And if you wanted to spend another, say, it's $150 for the base pledge. For another, say, $150, you can get all the units that unlocked, including enough that the Boltons would have more or less parity unit-wise with the Lannisters and the Starks. So you'd have 3 small-sized, but decent, with some decent options, armies. And I was in for $1, which I don't count as backing, by the way, for the Christmas thing, for the New Year's predictions episode, where I said that I would support 2 or fewer Kickstarters. I've supported 1. The Mantic Terrain one is the only one right now, theoretically, because, like I said, I'm splitting hairs here, and we'll see if I get away with it. But the main thing is, so I'm at $1, and I've been waiting ever since for the Pledge Manager to come out, where I have to choose whether I'm going to go and back it or not. And A, I'm a crazy, ridiculous fanboy of the TV show, although the game is based on the books. B, I love the books, or at least the early books, and I love all the characters and the story. And C, I love fantasy war games. But for some reason, I wasn't jumping in, and I couldn't figure it out. And then at Gen Con, Time of Legends, Joan of Arc by Mythic was, I stumbled upon that, and you've heard me talk about that a lot. And I loved it, and it was a Kickstarter also that was going to be starting soon. And then I started to think, what's going to happen if I'm going to have to make a decision. And in my head, I was like, well, I'll go, base pledge on both, maybe. That giant dragon is crazy awesome looking. And you can find it all over the web now, because the Time of Legends Joan of Arc Kickstarter is going on as you hear this. The dragon is huge. I'm not even going to try to guess at the dimensions, because then I'll be wrong, and people will be all up in arms. So it's just huge. And so I started looking at that Kickstarter, and right now I'm pledging for the they're doing it the new way, where there aren't a billion different levels. There's either you're in for $1 or you're not in. So I'm in right now. It's awesome. It's 15 millimeter, and it's hex based movement, so it's not just a freeform war game, tabletop war game like the ones that I usually enjoy. But 15 millimeter is a great scale for this, where you're going to have these big sweeping armies, and it's a very cool backstory where you have the 100 Years' War, but you have the 100 Years' War with all of these cool aspects, as if all of the myths and legends of that time and all of the biblical concepts and the concepts of demons that the people either really believed in or professed to believe in their artwork and things like that. If those were all real, this is the world of Time of Legends, Joan of Arc. So it looks awesome. And so here I am. I come to this nexus of, I've got the $1 sitting in the A Song of Ice and Fire, and I've got the Joan of Arc, and they're both coming together. And I decided, you know what? I'm gonna listen to a Game of Thrones again, and see, because I want to want A Song of Ice and Fire. That's what I want to want, and I want that to be the game I want it to be, although I couldn't identify that. So so I'm listening, and it strikes me all of a sudden as I'm listening that they're talking about armies of thousands of men, or temporary skirmishes with just a few guys on either side. Like small skirmishes with a few guys on either side. They're not talking about a battle where blocks of 12 guys are, marching around the battlefield, and it struck me that the game, although the game looks good, it's not a game that I think, in my head, was meshing with the concepts of combat that I get from the books and the TV shows. Probably even more the TV shows. Nobody's marching in lockstep on the TV shows. That's not true. You have the Unsullied, but other than that, everybody's like, running around screaming. So it struck me as I was trying to figure this out that these massed battles that you can get in the Joan of Arc game, where, you've got all these horses and all these men. No, I'm not going to go there. That's much more in keeping with the Song of Ice and Fire battles. And the skirmish concept of, a few choice characters running around with maybe some support guys, or a more free-form movement and combat system with those same numbers that you get from a Song of Ice and Fire, that's more in keeping with my head. Although I love the concept of there being a sideboard where non-combatants are vying for control and influence over the table. So, like I said, I really like the concept, but it just doesn't, other than that sideboard with all the intrigue, it doesn't, to me, doesn't capture the feel of that combat. And so I don't know. I still don't know what I'm going to do. I still don't know. I mean, it's been months, and the pledge manager hasn't come up yet for the CMON game. But the Joan of Arc game is looking amazing. The models look crazy cool. The terrain that you get, I mean, really, the box that you get, the base pledge has got buildings and trees and fences and guys and angels and demons and cavalry. And the stretch goals, you're getting like bears, like trained bears to fight more demons and these penitents and these other real wacky combatants that are loosely based on the Middle Ages. And so I'm finding myself more excited about that. And I'm starting to think, well, if I don't do Game of Thrones at all, that would be more money that I could fold into this game. But I just don't know, because again, I'm reflecting on the pile of games I got last year from Kickstarter that either never got opened, or they got opened once so I could inventory them to make sure I got what I paid for, and then they're now in the attic. And I don't know. I'm agonizing, and I just don't know what I'm going to do. But I don't know. Jeanne d'Arc. I don't know. And so I'm agonizing. But I figured it out at least. I think it's that flavor of the combat is just not capturing me. And if they came up with a set of skirmish rules for the Song of Ice and Fire minis, or even better, some skirmish rules, but it also had that intrigue, I'd be in a heartbeat, and I wouldn't be able to stop myself, and I'd be spending money on both of these like they were going out of style. But with the in my head, it's just not a ranked troop-based story, and so that's my agony. That is my first world problem today. And that's about all I've got to say. I'll keep you posted. Thanks for listening, and good night.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
Now, walking the mall like what up, I got a big box. Gotta fill it up with some books from the comic shop. X-Men with Iceman, they're so damn frosty.
Damn, Bobby Drake is a cold-ass honky.
Rolling in hella deep, looking for some DC. Rocking Bronze Age, keep my arrow and my lantern green. Draped in a robin cape, cover cut out next to me. Probably should've washed this, smells like King Cobra sheets. But damn, it was 99 cents. Copping up, reading, about to go and get some hero clicks. Passing up an Archie comic for the latest Walking Dead. Paul Dini, Alan Moore, Peter David, George Perez. Going in my bag, I'm a happy, it's a bargain, kids. I'ma take a Stanley style, No, for real, ask Stan, can I have his comic style? X-Men, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Fantastic Four. Mad Mutant Powers, making crazy movie cameos. They had an Age of Ultron, I bought an Age of Ultron. I bought a Captain Marvel, then I bought the Atom. Hello, my Ant-Man, my Mellow. Hellboy ain't got nothing on my Daredevil, hell no. I could get some Snake Eyes, Copperhead from G.I. Joe. Cobra Heads would be like,
oh, he got the Destro.
I'm gonna pop some tags, only got 20 titles on my pull list. I'm going shopping, looking for a comic, this is fracking awesome. I'm gonna pop some bags, only got 20 titles on my pull list. I'm going shopping, looking for a comic, this is fracking awesome.
What you know about wearing a callop on your noggin? What you know about Joker beating up on Robin? I'm reading, I'm searching up that Gotham. One man's Nightwing as another man's Red Hood.
I got a Watchman with the big Manhattan and Rorschach up in his thrift shop coat. I'm at the shop and you can find me in the stacks. I'm that sucker hanging out with the fans. Your ladies, your mans, demand the costuming fans. Take the lasso and the bands and they rock that Wonder Woman. The grappling hook and the belt on the Batwoman. They hit the party and they purr like a Catwoman. They be like, oh, the girl, she's hella fake. I'm like, yo, that's no way to treat a fan. Come in here and listen, let's do some simple addition. You knock her for a t-shirt, that's just some ignorant biz. I call that being a bully and a hypocrite. I call that being a big dumb idiot. The girl's a reader, yo. And keeping her from reading what she wants in a book is a hella don't. Geek gang, come take a look through my bat scope. Try to stop girls being fans, man, you hella won't. Man, you hella won't.
I'm gonna pop some bags, only got 20 titles on my pull list. I'm going shopping, looking for a comic, this is fracking awesome. Hulk and Fantastic Four, Batman and Green Arrow, they're in the books I got from that comic shop down the road. Spider Jerusalem, Venom and Halo Jones, they're in the books I bought from that comic shop down the road. I'm gonna pop some bags, only got 20 titles on my pull list. I'm going shopping, looking for a comic, this is fracking awesome.
That was Comic Book Shop from our friends at Dragon Con TV. I'll let you try to figure out why I thought it was appropriate for this episode. Check out more of their amazing work over at dragoncontv.org.